Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D and WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the 6th part of What If Deku Were Dead and He Reincarnated into a Cat. All credits for this video go to their respective authors. So please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. If it wasn't for the mind link between Hitoshi and Moss, Hitoshi was sure he'd be a crying mess every day he woke up and Moss wasn't with him. The mind link in purgatory that was. However, Hitoshi told Moss that he did like purgatory all that much. It weirds me out. Hitoshi told him one night that he couldn't sleep. Ever since learning that your uncle wants me because we're close. I don't like it. That's completely fair. Though, I haven't seen him since that first time. The door is completely locked and I don't know how to open it. Moss confessed and Hitoshi reached for his side where Moss would usually snuggle up to him. But there was no Moss and that made Hitoshi's heart ache with guilt and sadness over this whole situation. Enough about your uncle. How's Nezu treating you? Well, I hope. Fine. Moss responded in kind. He's been good to me. But listen to this. Nezu lives in a house and he has a shed in the backyard and guess what he keeps back there? Body of missing HPSC members. Hitoshi joked while he bit his lip to stop himself from laughing. Moss did laugh at that. No. He is lab rats. I don't mean he's experimenting on rats. I mean he rescues lab rats and takes them into his shed. The shed is made with concrete so they can't burrow out and he feeds them on the regular with fresh fruits, seeds, and veggies. He talks to them and I'm sure he can understand them like he understands me. Oh my goodness, that's surprisingly understandable given his background in all actuality. How many does he own? Enough to fill a shed. Wow, it's impressive that he managed to rescue that many rats. Can you understand them? Only a few words here and there, like with the neighbor's dog, but not enough to hold a conversation. I know that they flock to him like he's their next messiah and in a way, I get it. Nezu gave them a second chance probably when they thought there wasn't one. Hitoshi felt himself start to slip into sleep, but stayed awake to ask, like with you and Brine. You know Brine misses you. Brine, Pumpkin, and I'm sure Brat. They all miss you. Pumpkin sits by the front door and just stares at it. He misses his mother. Moss was absolutely snorting at that. Yeah, well, the cats make better company, that's for sure. Nezu doesn't allow the rats inside the house and I think he tolerates me. Though he did tell me I'm not allowed on the countertops, which is fair. Yeah, Hitoshi yawned. I get that. Get some sleep, Hitoshi. It's not going to do you any good staying up like this. Yeah, it just sucks without you. The others are asking about you, at school that is. I just have to lie. Right now you've gotten lost. I got lost. You couldn't have told a more believable lie. The class knows I'm smarter than the average cat. I can't just get lost. No, you got lost. You see, we were walking home one day when a villain was attacking. Not us, of course, and it caused rubble to fall down and separate us. We were in a part of town we've only been in once or twice, so it stands to reason you got lost. Moss gave another snort at that. And they believe that. It made Hitoshi shrug. Nobody has really questioned it. But for now we decided it's best if we don't. Hitoshi stopped when he felt a sharp pain in his head. Don't bring you to school for the time being just so the HPSC doesn't get wise about us trying to dupe them. You good? Onset headache. Alright, the distance probably isn't helping you any bit and is causing your quirk a little more than if I were right next to you. I'm hanging the mind link up for the night before you get sick. Good night. Wait, what? Never mind, it's not important. Good night. The link was cut and Hitoshi let his head be cradled by his pillows. The relief was instant, like having that first sip of caffeine when you realized you haven't had any and were suffering from caffeine withdrawal. He hoped the HPSC would get off of their backs and Moss could come back and live with him his owner again. Hitoshi flopped on his back and looked up at the ceiling. He almost said those words but stopped himself. Don't make it weird. He grumbled to himself before flipping over to his side and throwing his blanket over his cold shoulders. Don't make it weird. He repeated to himself before he allowed himself to drift off into sleep for the night. Thanks for accompanying me, Monoma, Hitoshi said as he and Monoma walked through the hallways leading to the support course. Of course, I need an update on some of my stuff as well, so it's no harm done. So, what are you thinking of updating? Not updating, adding to. You see, me and Aburo were talking the other day and I mentioned how I need to get the upper hand on people who may know how my quirk works, or just having some sort of advantage. Then Shouta came up and suggested that I should change my voice. So, I'm going to see if that's possible. What Hitoshi wasn't telling Monoma was that it was actually Moss was the one to suggestion such a thing, not Aburo. Change your voice. Whatever for exactly. How would that help? Hitoshi saw the doors to the support coming up and he continued to speak to Monoma. It's simple. If I can somehow change my voice to that of the villain's partner or even just some new, it could throw them off and they could. There was an explosion, and before Hitoshi knew it, he was suddenly pinned. Whoops! The chipper voice of a female came, followed by a giggle, and when the smoke cleared, Hitoshi found breast directly on his face. The culprit being the girl with pink dreads that was currently using him as a pillow. Hatsum, power loader, came into view, and he was clearly upset. Do you know how long it's going to take for me to clean this up and patch up? That's it. I only allowed you to use the workshop after hours because you promised you wouldn't make a mess of the place, and now look. Finally, the boobs were removed from Hitoshi's face as Hatsum gave a giggle. Oh, power loader, explosions are only a natural part of the process. They're bound to happen. Power loader gave a grunt in response while Monoma went to help Hitoshi up. You look like you were enjoying yourself there, Monoma teased, which caused Hitoshi to scoff. Not my type, he muttered to his friend before he walked into the support course workshop. Hitoshi walked up to power loader. Sir, I have an idea I'd like to run by you. Of course, Shouta told me to expect you two for some upgrades and some equipment. What is it? So, Hitoshi went over the whole process and the request he had. Is it possible to change my vocal cords to anyone's voice? Anything is possible, Hatsum piped up, and suddenly Hitoshi was forced away from the teacher as Hatsum took him by the arm. Power loader sighed almost fondly as he watched this go down, then he turned. And you, young man? Monoma smiled. Yes, I need an upgrade to my costume. You see, I tried to take an. Hitoshi drowned out Monoma's request as Hatsum started to look over Hitoshi. She got real grabby with him, mainly around his throat, and she even ran her finger down his Adam's apple, which made him feel weird. So, what are you looking for? I can make you a voice changer that you pop in your mouth ... but then you couldn't change on demand. Now, what's your quirk? I assume it requires voice activation? Brainwashing, and yes, it does. But know that I can't brainwash through phones or megaphones for that matter, he told her, and she nodded while jotting this all down. It would probably be best if the villains don't see you talking. Oh, Hitoshi watched as her eyes sparked with inspiration. She grabbed a scrap piece of paper and started to draw while mumbling to herself almost wildly. Hitoshi looked over her shoulder and saw just what she was drawing. Some sort of over-the-mouth cover. Okay, I think I know what to do. What you need is something to go over your mouth and something that your quirk could work around. So, what you need is a mask, but the mask should be able to change your chords. However, without it being electronic is a challenge, but lucky for you, I love challenges. Hatsum was grinning as she said this. She continued to doodle the mask, and Hitoshi watched her with interest. How does this look? Hitoshi inspected the doodle. It looked to be, as she said, a mask that would wrap around the entire lower half of his face. It was a rough sketch, but even still it looked so cool. That looks really cool. Hatsum smiled. No electronics, huh? She gnawed on the end of her eraser. I can make this work. Come back in about a week. I should have a few babies lined up. A few. Hitoshi gasped, and Hatsum kept her grin. Of course, support items are like shoes. It's not one size fits all, and you're going to need to see what works best for you. Plus, it gives me an excuse to try my hand on non-electronic items. It made sense, and Hitoshi gave a nod. All right, next week. Next Monday. Are you sure? Is that enough time? More than enough, trust me. All right, thank you so much, Hatsum. Hitoshi bowed to her respectfully, and she gave him a soft PSH noise out of her mouth as she waved him off. No need to be so formal. I love working and inviting things, and your modifier is just what I need to help push my limits. That made Hitoshi a little more at ease, and he stood by waiting for Monoma to finish talking to Powerloader. Monoma took his time explaining just what he wanted for his outfit. He wanted a fabric that could resist basic elements that he knows he can take: fire, water, and electricity. Powerloader was listening and writing everything down. Okay, Powerloader hummed when Monoma finished up. Thankfully, all your measurements are on file, so we don't have to retake them, but it should be simple enough, just made with different types of fibers. He knocked the pencil against his head before nodding. We should have it done in a week, maybe a little longer, but it should be done before finals. Thank you, Sensei. Monoma bowed and then straightened up. He looked at Hitoshi and gave his friend a kindly smile. Ready? Hitoshi nodded, and the two of them bidded one more goodbye and stepped out of the ruined door. Hitoshi felt a little better and excited at the prospect of this voice changer. This could really change the game for him. What are you and Nedzu doing for the weekend? Hitoshi had asked that Friday night as he laid on his bed and was reading a chapter book. The sun was starting to go down, and Hitoshi could see the orange glow from his window. There was a sigh from the other side. Lecture. He's lecturing me. He's been lecturing me. He's going to continue to lecture me tomorrow. He wants me to learn. I want to be home. Moss all but groaned. I miss my exercise wheel. There was a distinct whimper, and Hitoshi realized Moss, or rather Izuku, was on the verge of crying. Izuku actually hiccuped. Nedzu is like a boring uncle. He doesn't even own a TV. Just monitors to watch people. Oh, Mossy, I'm sorry, wait, he watches people? He loves to watch people. Hitoshi winced and was glad that Izuku couldn't see him trying not to smile. Why? He asked, a little concerned. I don't know. World domination. I guess it's not all bad. Sometimes when I'm lonely I watch the camera in the house. Hazashi is currently watching a Disney movie with Oboro and Eri. There's a camera in the house. Hitoshi sat up in alarm. No, there are multiple. Instantly Hitoshi looked around his room for a hidden camera. How? He saw nothing but his own walls looking back at him. Is he watching us now? No, but I am. There was a knock on his door and Hitoshi jumped like Nedzu himself now knew Hitoshi knew. It wasn't Nedzu, just Shouta. Shouta looked at him and smiled before leaning against the doorframe. Hey, hold that thought, Moss. Hey. Hitoshi shut his chapter book and sat up straight. What's up, sire? He teased, which made Shouta smirk. Your friends are at the door. They wanted to talk to you. His dad jabbed his thumb towards the direction of the main room and Hitoshi got up and off of the bed and knew that his confusion was prominent on his face. Walking out of his room he saw Monoma, Denki, and Momo all waved at him as he approached them. Hey, what's up, guys? Well, Toshi. Denki came up and put one arm around Hitoshi's shoulders. Hitoshi felt himself make a bit of a face as he stared at Denki, who was unbothered. We noticed that you were down about losing Moss, so it was decided amongst us that we're going to spoil you tonight. Huh? He asked as the words didn't just process. We're taking you to the movies, dude. Denki explained in full and it made Hitoshi blink again. You don't have to. Monoma pulled on Hitoshi's ear. We want to. So, come on, ask your parents before we're late. Never ever in a million years did Hitoshi ever think he was going to be invited to the movies, especially not by friends. So, shyly, he looked over his shoulder at the adults and Eri, who were all watching. Can I go to the movies? Hitoshi asked after a pregnant pause. The Fosters looked at each other but didn't say anything, then Shouta shrugged. Sure, just don't stay out too late you guys and stick together. Do you need money? Do I need? Hitoshi looked at Shouta in surprise. Money? Shouta finished in the exact same confused tone that Hitoshi was giving him. Sure. Shouta, along with the others, chuckled at this. Shouta reached in and grabbed his wallet where he pulled out some yen. Hitoshi went to grab it but Shouta pulled away. Remember, I don't want you out too late. I'll leave the porch light on. If you aren't home by 10 at the latest, I'm going to go searching for you. Understood? Yes, sir. Good. And Shouta handed the money over. Hitoshi took and stuffed it into his pants pocket. Stay safe. Will do. Bye. Love you guys. Hitoshi called as he put his shoes on, then he was promptly swept out of the door by his friends who seemed to be equally as excited as he was. They had to take a train to the movies and they all stayed together as instructed. Surprisingly, Momo looked the most excited out of all of them. Her eyes were sparkling with a gleam that Hitoshi had never seen before as she was grinning from ear to ear. It made Hitoshi to see her so excited. When they got to the theater, his friends were true to their word and paid for his tickets. What snacks do you want? Monoma asked as they looked at the snacks. I'm thinking of a churro personally. Hitoshi looked at the snacks and shrugged. I dunno. I've never been to a theater before. A small buttered popcorn. Good choice. Monoma smiled back at him. Drink? Sure. Monoma just looked at him. What kind? Hitoshi blushed before giving a nervous laugh. Just a Coke is fine. When they regrouped, Momo and Denki had their own snacks. Momo had both a popcorn and a hot dog while Denki was already snacking on his large popcorn. I think that's the most I've seen Momo have when it comes to food, Hitoshi thought. It wasn't until after did he realize he said this through the mind link because Moss spoke, nearly making him drop his popcorn. You're with Momo right now. Where'd you go? Oh, well, we're just at the movies. He shyly explained, feeling bad because Moss seemed so bored. There was a silence in his mind before horror. Please stop calling me that. Hitoshi. Monoma snapped his fingers in front of Hitoshi's eyes to gain his attention. Come on, the movie is going to start in less than 10 minutes. Stop dilly-dallying. Right, I'm coming. The movie was pretty good, however. Out of the corner of his eye, Hitoshi watched Momo. The girl ate like she was starving, and it made his brow furrow more than once as she devoured her food. At one point, Monoma patted her shoulder and spoke so softly that Hitoshi couldn't hear him over the movie. Denki, who was sitting next to Hitoshi and Monoma, liked to talk about the observations, like how he picked up on references and whatnot. Hitoshi just smiled and let him speak as he only spoke once in a while and didn't expect to be spoken to back. Hitoshi wasn't the only one he would comment on. He would sometimes lean into Monoma and speak lowly about some observation or another, and Monoma didn't seem to mind. All in all, it was a pleasant experience. When the movie ended, they threw their empty containers away, with Hitoshi satisfied just having this experience, not really caring about the movie one way or another. They walked out into the nighttime air, the clock striking 9 p.m. almost on the dot. Just enough time for Hitoshi to get home. I wanted to thank you guys. This was honestly one of the best experiences I've had, he told them as he started to walk backwards so he could face all of his friends. They were smiling back at him. Yeah, it was fun. We should do it again. Denki called out into the night sky. His voice echoed around as he threw his hands up and twirled around once. Then another voice spoke. one that made Hitoshi stop walking instantly as the voice was coming from behind him. I dunno, I thought the movie was boring. Hitoshi slowly looked over his shoulder, praying silently that he wasn't going to see what he thought he would see. There, behind him, stood Tamura, Shigaraki, and Nice. Tamura, Hitoshi almost didn't recognize without that hand covering his face. He was looking at his nails almost boredly while Nice stood there, his hands in his coat pockets. It was warm out and he was wearing a coat. Warm. Shouta melted away from this boy's body as he stared at his palms in surprise. And warm, he repeated in awe as Moss's blood was still drying on his hands. He's always cold, Hitoshi realized as he narrowed his own eyes. Hitoshi felt a hand sneak up to his shoulder and he just allowed himself to be pulled back so he and his friends were all together. We don't want any trouble, Momo growled as she stepped out and put herself in front of Hitoshi. Oh, we know you don't. Truthfully, we don't want any trouble either, Tamura sighed as he focused on them. He shoved his hands into his pockets but kept his thumbs extended and away from his jeans. Oh, good. So, let's just go our separate ways then. Momo almost seemed to whisper while Hitoshi felt Monoma grab one shoulder while Denki grabbed the other. Forget this whole interaction happened. Tamura's red eyes were not impressed as he shook his head slowly from side to side. You misunderstand, little girl. We don't want trouble. We want him. Tamura pointed directly at Hitoshi. So he stepped up threateningly. Just make this easy on us and hand him over. It happened so quickly that Hitoshi almost missed it. Monoma slapped Momo on the back with all 5 of his fingers. Then, while using her quirk, he made something and tossed it with all of his strength at Tamura. Whatever it was bounced off of Tamura's head with enough force that it forced him to not only step back but to let out a ridiculous sound in the process. Something along the lines of gagog, which would have been hilarious if not for the situation. Hitoshi was then grabbed by Denki and they were running for their lives. This way, Denki gasped as they all quickly cut through an alley. Was that a rock? Hitoshi demanded as the 4 of them made haste. Monoma just nodded. It was the only thing I knew how to make. You need to know molecule structure with Yamomo's quirk. It's true, Yamomo gasped out all the same. You could have just picked a rock up off of the ground. Hey, I just saved your ass. Don't judge me, Monoma yelled back at him. Shit. The 4 of them were forced to slide to a stop as Nice made himself seen. He must have cut another alley to get ahead of them. Denki was the quickest to stop and run to the next adjacent alleyway. Hitoshi and the others all managed to turn away just the same as they managed to keep together. Shit, Denki cried again when he hit a chain link fence blocking the segment off. There was clear construction going on in front of them. Some new building being built, a big one to boot with cranes and bulldozers scattered around the massive area. Climb, Monoma demanded when they turned and saw Nice and Tamura now running for them. Having no choice, one by one they started to climb the fence. The thing about this fence was that it was easily 20 feet high. There was nothing they could do. They climbed the fence in a panic. Hitoshi watched as a shirt suddenly fell down in front of his eyes. Then, a box spring mattress fell shortly after it. The mattress was the only thing to break their fall as they all jumped. Hitoshi was the last to jump down, and when he did, his shoulder hit the mattress and he lightly bounced up but was otherwise okay. He didn't even have time to recoup when Momo, now shirtless but had her bra on, grabbed his hand and the 4 of them continued to run towards the construction. How cute, Tamura grunted and he used his quirk to just make an opening in the fence for him and Nice. Nice, holy shit. It was the most terrifying thing for Hitoshi to see as Nice came crawling after them. Yes, crawling at a speed so fast it looked inhuman. He stopped being human long ago. Nice slowed. What stopped being human, Hitoshi? Moss asked suddenly. Why do you sound afraid? Is everything okay? Was it a horror movie? Oh my god. It was at that moment as he was running and looking back at the creature crawling after them. As his cat was talking to him, the cat directly linked to this monster that it all made sense. How these two managed to strike at such a moment. Hitoshi, Moss inquired when Hitoshi didn't answer. Hitoshi couldn't answer as he faced forward and picked up the pace. I got you. His ankle was grabbed. It was more than 20 feet behind me a moment ago. Hitoshi cried as he hit the ground hard. His chin smacked the ground first, forcing his lower teeth to bite his tongue. Blood welled in his mouth and dirt from the freshly demolished area filled his nose. Hitoshi let out a scream as he threw his caught leg back and struck Nice right in the head. Let go of me, he demanded, and was surprised by how strong Nice actually was. Hitoshi was forced on his back as Nice managed to get on top of him. Nice was grinning madly. Those goddamn teeth were horrifying to witness. I won't hurt you, Nice whispered as he reached up and collected the blood from Hitoshi's busted lip. I can't. Then he stuck the bloodied finger into his mouth. Oh Jesus Christ. Denki whispered fearfully as they all watched as Nice transferred into Hitoshi. Nice looked at his form. It's not the same, he whispered as he sat up. I'm still cold. Hitoshi finished. Good job, baby brother, now let's take him in. Nice, with lightning reflexes, ducked just as a construction hook came swinging over his head. Tamura Shigaraki didn't have time to react when the hook smashed right into his face and forced him back. Tamura went down and didn't get back up. The hook came swinging back and Hitoshi found his bearings as Nais was distracted by the hook and getting ready to duck. Hitoshi kicked the Namu off of him with ease. Nais gasped as he fell onto his back and Hitoshi scrambled, grabbing a rebar pipe that was left on the ground. He turned and swung with all of his might, catching a shocked Nais right in the head. Nais, in that split second before the pipe the side of his head, looked shocked, dismayed, and overall betrayed. "You are not Izuku Midoriya," Hitoshi cried when the bar struck Nais the first time. "You're a faker who wishes he was." A second hit, this time the other side of the face. Nais let out a high-pitched shriek of pain. The thing about this shriek was that it sounded so inhuman. It made Hitoshi's skin crawl. Hitoshi's own skin started to melt away from the body of Nais as the boy made a mad scramble to get away. "You're not even human," Hitoshi cried after the retreating form of the Namu. The boy looked more animalistic than ever as he was on all fours. His green eyes, they reminded Hitoshi of Masa's eyes, the pupils into tight cat-like slits with the green being so vibrant they were almost glowing. His teeth were gnashed together as he snarled at Hitoshi. He looked like a cornered animal. From the angle they were at, Hitoshi could see the crater in his skull. "That pink brain is still pulsating away. You stopped being human the day you were created. You're a monster." Hitoshi tightened his grip on the rebar so tight that the metal dug into his palms. "Learned that trick from your uncle, did you?" Nais asked as he eyed the rebar. "Getting someone when they least expect it and then hitting them again just to teach them a lesson." "Maybe I did," Hitoshi almost screamed. "I'll do it again if you don't stay the fuck away from me and my friends." Hitoshi took a bold step forward with the rebar raised. "It's not enough. It's not enough." Hitoshi, despite having the upper hand, was the one feeling cornered as he and Nais stared at each other. Just calling him a monster wasn't enough. Nais still seemed to think they were friends and they weren't. Not even when Hitoshi called him a monster. When Hitoshi hit him with a rebar so hard that it was bruising on one side and bleeding on the other, Nais still tried to step up to him, crawl up to him. The Namu had his hand on the ground and looked like he was going to approach even still. "Hit him where it hurts." Hitoshi's eyes narrowed as he realized what he needed to do. It made him shake and made him feel guilty. He needed to hurt Izuku where it would hurt. "Do you think I'd ever be friends with a null?" Just saying that slur made Hitoshi sick. Nais froze in place. "I'm not." "What? You got a few fancy quirks from daddy and you think that changes anything?" Hitoshi swung the rebar and caught Nais, again, in the head. Nais cried again as he grabbed his face and scrambled back in alarm. His wounds were healing quickly and maybe that stopped Hitoshi from feeling too bad. "I will never be friends with someone like you. Never in a million years. I'd rather stay friendless if I had the choice." Nais actually had tears in his eyes as he looked at Hitoshi. He gasped and ducked down when Hitoshi swung again. Then, Hitoshi said the words he knew he could never take back. The words that made him shake, but words that Nais needed to hear to finally get the hint. "I'm glad you took Bakugo's advice." The Namu protected his head when Hitoshi rose the bar up and Hitoshi's heart ached for the creature when the Namu, in a moment very reminiscent of Hitoshi's own past, put an arm out to try and stop the blows. Nais dragged himself along the ground trying to get away from Hitoshi. Then, when he got his footing, he took off in a run, but not before speaking one final time as he retreated. I won't forget this. I won't ever forget this, Hitoshi Shinzu." Nais looked back and tears were cascading down his cheeks and collecting at the base of his chin. "Never, never, never. I hope you're happy." Nais hiccuped. "I hate you." Nais reminded Hitoshi of a toddler crying for their mother before the Namu ran off. Hitoshi took a step back and then spat blood on the ground. There was silence and Hitoshi fell back on his butt. "Before anybody asks, no, I don't feel that way actually. I don't hate quirkless people and I'm not glad Izuku Midoriya committed suicide." Hitoshi wiped the blood from his mouth. "It was just something I knew would get him Nais to leave us alone." Hitoshi looked back at his friends' stunned faces. "Holy shit, dude. That was brutal," Denki whispered. "Yeah, well," Hitoshi spat more blood out again. "It had to be done. Nais thinks we're friends when we're not. He thinks he is Izuku when he's not." "How do you know this and ... who even is Izuku Midoriya?" Momo inquired as she came up next to him. She moved his chin up so she could look at his busted mouth. "Yeah, that's what I've been wondering," Monomo whispered and crossed his arms over his chest. "This was my first time seeing that thing and hearing that name." "From what I know," Denki spoke next, "he was a boy Bakugo knew in middle school, the boy that Bakugo pushed to suicide. He was quirkless. That thing had a quirk." He turned into Hitoshi. "Now," Hitoshi answered next as Momo patched up his busted lip. "He has a quirk now and it's all too much to really explain right now. Besides, we still have a problem to deal with," Hitoshi whispered when he looked over at Tamura Shigaraki's prone body on the ground. "Oh shit, I guess that hook really knocked him out. I didn't think it would ... Then again, those things do weigh close to 20 pounds. Momo whispered as she stood. She quickly made some chains with her quirk. "Someone go and alert the heroes." Well, they didn't need to. It would seem as the moment the words left her mouth there was a swooping noise behind them and they all turned to see Hawk standing there. What's going on? Hawks asked as he greeted them with a friendly wave. Isn't it a little too late and dangerous to be playing around such an area? Kiddos. Oh, thank goodness. Denki fell to his knees with a sigh. Sir, quickly. We have Tamura Shigaraki, the man that broke into the USJ. You need to take him to the police before anything else happens. Momo nearly begged as she pointed at Tamura's unconscious form. Holy shit. Hawks whistled lowly. So, it seems you do. Alright, say no more. Let me call for backup in an ambulance. You kids stay put. They didn't need to be told twice. The four of them stayed huddled together when an ambulance came and they sat in the back while Hawks cuffed Shigaraki and spoke over the comms for some backup. Well, who would come as backup but Oboro, who was patrolling nearby? Oboro scooped Hitoshi into a tight hug. I'm so glad you're okay. I can't imagine how scared you all must have been. And he kissed Hitoshi about 10 times on the face. Hell, he even kissed each of the others on the head. Don't you all worry, I'll call your parents. Just stay here, okay? Here, Oboro. And the EMTs looking them over, gave them blankets. Momo sighed tiredly. My parents are going to kill me. It's not your fault, Hitoshi told her while he patted her leg. If anything, you can even blame me. They wanted me and you were just in the crossfire. No, you don't understand, Momo hiccuped as she started to visibly cry. I snuck out. She hid her shame from Hitoshi by covering her eyes. I just wanted to be normal for once. I wanted to go to the movies with friends and eat a bunch of junk food. She continued to sob. They're never going to let me out of the house after this. Monoma put a hand on her leg. I'm sorry, he whispered to her. If I would have known, I wouldn't have convinced you. It's my fault. Momo sat up and sucked in a shaky breath. I knew what I was doing, and for that, I must pay the price. I will. She put her emotions behind her and wiped the tears from her eyes. I will take whatever punishment they give me. Hitoshi reached over and interlocked his fingers with hers, and she held his hand so tightly it hurt. It was a soft moment between all four of them as they all sat in a line and just held each other's hands. Monoma to Momo, Momo to Hitoshi, and Hitoshi to Denki. I can't even remember how the movie ended, Denki suddenly said. Hitoshi laughed a bitter and mirthless laugh. Me either. Sleep did not come to Hitoshi the night after Nice's attack. He tossed and turned for a few hours until he couldn't take it anymore. He was glad it was the weekend as he padded out of his room and into the kitchen. Hitoshi turned on the light by the stove and put a pot on it where he would fill with water. Once filled, he left the water to boil. Hitoshi figured maybe if he filled his stomach with needless carbs, then he'd be lulled to sleep. So, he took out a ramen packet from the pantry and some spices out of the cabinet. Hitoshi opened the ramen packet and dropped the brick into the water. While waiting for his ramen to soften and get hot, he started mixing spices into a bowl. You know, Hitoshi cried out in alarm as he turned to face Shouta, who had apparently just gotten off of patrol. His foster dad was dirty and it was clear he's been in a bit of a tussle. He put his goggles up top his head as he tilted his head while staring at Hitoshi. It's a little late to be making ramen. Hitoshi looked away and shrunk a little. I got hungry. Well, he wasn't telling the truth, nor was he lying. He could eat, obviously. Shouta let out a soft noise and leaned against the door frame. Something on your mind? Hitoshi took some chopsticks and gently poked the still brick of ramen into the water. I can't help but think about Nice, he finally admitted as he stared at the boiling water. At the time I figured I was doing the right thing. I'm assuming you're talking about what happened a few hours ago, Shouta asked, and it made Hitoshi nod slowly. Hitoshi put the tips of the chopsticks in his mouth as his mind replayed what happened. Learn that trick from your uncle, did you? Getting someone when they least expect it and then hitting them again to teach them a lesson? It made Hitoshi want to tear up thinking about it. Maybe I did. His own voice yelled back through his head. Hitoshi frowned while staring blankly at his noodles. It was clear by his face and how pensive he looked and how his eyes misted up that Shouta caught on quickly that everything was not okay. You want to talk about it? Shouta pulled out the chair to the table and sat down. He started to take off his work boots. Hitoshi looked at him before he poked the ramen again. The ramen was starting to soften up as the water was bubbling. Hitoshi's brow furrowed almost angrily as he just continued to stare at the ramen while keeping his tears at bay. I got Nice to leave us alone, Hitoshi finally whispered. Oh, a loud sob erupted out of Nice's mouth as the creature didn't even bother to wipe his eyes as tears flooded out of his eyes and fat rivers down his cheeks. I won't ever forget this, Hitoshi Shinsu. Never, never, never. Hitoshi let out a shudder. I made him cry. You made him cry. I figured he just had one emotion, revenge, Shouta mumbled. I thought so too. Hitoshi cut himself off while the memory popped back up into his mind. Nice whimpered as he raised his hand up and he scrambled away from Hitoshi. His hand was out to try and catch the rebar pipe should Hitoshi try to bring it down again. Hitoshi raised his hand out to stop Jaunouchi from bringing that spoon again. He was screaming behind the muzzle as he tried to scramble along the floor to safety. Hitoshi put his hands over his eyes as he felt his shoulders shake while he tried to suppress his tears. At the time I thought I was doing the right thing. He tackled me to the ground and used his quirk on me again. He and Tamura hunted us down and Nais somehow managed to hack the mind link between Moss and I. I was just so scared and angry and wanted him to leave us be. I wanted him to stop. Hitoshi shuddered while trying to suppress his sobs. Shouta stood up and padded over to Hitoshi. He brought Hitoshi in and hugged him from behind. What did you do? He urged Hitoshi to continue in a gentle tone. I was just trying to get him to leave us alone. I grabbed a rebar and I smacked him with it. I smacked him with it a lot in fact. I realized it wasn't enough. He was still friendly with me even after I hit him. He wouldn't leave me alone. So, Hitoshi grabbed Shouta's hand with his own shaking hands. I thought, what would upset Izuku? Because Nais thinks he's Izuku and Hitoshi let out another shuddering breath. I called him a slur, and I told him that I was glad he died. I felt guilty while doing it, but I thought maybe it would pass, but the guilt has been eating away at me and if anything it's intensified. I don't even know why. I know why but not why. Hitoshi shook his head vigorously and Shouta sighed. I think you're upset because, despite Nais being a Namu, he's still a part of Izuku, you know, your best friend. A part of Izuku that you pushed to tears, called a slur, and attacked. Hitoshi let out a sob. It was soft so as not to wake the others and Shouta shushed him. None of that, he encouraged while gently patting Hitoshi's hair. You panicked and weren't thinking logically, which, honestly, nobody can really blame you. Shouta explained. He asked me if I learned my moves from my uncle and Hitoshi hiccuped. I'm so scared that I'm going to be like him. I never want someone to be afraid like I was, and another soft hiccuping sob shook his body. Look at me, Shouta told him, and Hitoshi did just that. Shouta looked into Hitoshi's wet and tear-filled eyes. You are not like that monster. Don't you ever compare yourself to him again. You recognize that you went too far in what you did. Now, the best thing you can do is learn from it, and I feel this shouldn't be said, but I'm going to say anyway, don't call people slurs from now on, okay? Hitoshi nodded and was surprised when Shouta gently wiped his tears away. Good. Now, your water is about to boil over. Crap. Hitoshi broke away from Shouta to quickly take the pot off of the burner. And while it's none of my business, if you're still upset about what you did, you could always tell Moss what you did and let him judge you. After all, he is Izuku. Shouta scratched at his neck. Hitoshi stopped and looked at his father. What if he hates me too? Nice. I can handle hating me, but Moss, he's my best friend. True, but Moss is more logical than nice. Moss, if you explain yourself and your reasoning, will know that you were just scared. Or, he won't. Shouta now scratched at his scruff. From the sounds of it, you did treat him like his bullies in middle school. The noise that left Hitoshi's mouth was high-pitched and heartbroken as a new wave of tears flooded in Hitoshi's eyes. Shouta sighed. It's not easy to say what will and won't happen between you and Moss if you tell him what you did. But that being said, I think for your own mental health you should own up and, only if you see fit, apologize. To Moss, that is, not to Nais. I'd rather you stay far away from Nais. And Shouta ruffled Hitoshi's hair. Regardless, I'm going to bed. Make sure you clean up your mess and understand something. Shouta paused, which made Hitoshi look at him. You are not your uncle. What you did was out of defense for you and your friends who were being hunted. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Hitoshi gave another sniffle before nodding. Thank you. Shouta gave him one last tiny smile before turning and going to bed. This left Hitoshi alone to finish making and eating his late-night snack. Sleep came a little easier after that, be it the carbs or the conversation. The next day, sometime in the afternoon, Izuku really didn't know when, Moss and Nedzu were both attending the construction of the dorms. Both of them were forced into construction hats to oversee this operation, which was interesting for Moss as they actually had a hat small enough for him. The place sure was busy with some pros helping out the crew in an effort to get the dorms up quicker. The faster the dorms were up, the safer the students would be. It wasn't originally going to be rushed like this, but after what happened last night, Hitoshi and his friends being cornered at the movies by Tamura and Nais, that is, it was a group effort on all parts. I hope Hitoshi is okay. Izuku didn't know all the details of what happened last night, just that Hitoshi and his friends made it out okay and they managed to catch Tamura Shigaraki, but not Nais, which was both a relief and worrying at the same time. Hitoshi cut the mind link off in a hurry with a simple and hurried statement. I'm fine. Can't talk. Don't talk. And that was it. Yeah, that didn't leave Izuku with any anxiety at all. He wanted to make sure his friend was okay, but he had to stay away. God, did he hope the HPSC would leave them alone just so he and Hitoshi could talk face to face again. Yeah, I'm sure we'll have the dorms finished before finals. Give us about ... or ... 3 more days, I'd say. The foreman over the whole operation told Nedzu as they both looked over the blueprints. Izuku, who was on Nedzu's shoulder the whole time, just watched as they talked. Oh, wonderful. Nedzu seemed to cheer while he sipped his tea. Izuku looked at the cup and saucer in both of Nedzu's paws and decided fairly quickly that it wasn't worth it to question anything. I already have several teachers working overtime to talk to parents and get permission for temporary guardianship. Granted, it is a little short notice, but better late than never, I suppose. He hummed delightfully while gently putting his teacup down on the saucer in his hand. Thank you, foreman. Is there anything else? Yeah, actually, you mentioned the doors to the roofs here. The foreman was overlooking the blueprints. Is an electronic lock only accessible to those with a keycard necessary? Nedzu smiled. Absolutely. I don't want any of my students getting access to the rooftops. Very well. The foreman didn't seem to understand, but he let it be. He was just an employee doing his job, not really his place to question things. Still, they weren't done. Nedzu surveyed the area, checking on each dorm and the progress as people worked to get each building up and running. It was during his checkup on the one at dorms did he stop, sniff the air and sigh. Moss, go hide. The HPSC is here. He didn't need to be told twice. Izuku jumped from Nedzu's shoulder and went to the nearest tree. He climbed up to about the middle and sat on a branch overlooking Nedzu. A few moments later, a woman approached Nedzu, the president herself. Izuku narrowed his eyes on the old crone. Principal Nedzu, I see you two came to oversee everything up to standards. She inquired, and Nedzu, ever pleasant, just smiled. Of course, I wouldn't be a good principal if I didn't make sure everything was being made just the way I envision. Madam President only smiled. Of course, I hope you know with this inclusion that you insisted profusely on, might I add. We expect your students to work even harder now that they're so close to school. Nedzu's ear gave a little twitch at this. Oh, here. She handed Nedzu a file. We changed what we wanted from them during finals. Seeing how the villain attacks have become more frequent, we decided they need to be prepared and know how to fight villains. Oh, for the third years. I can assure you. No, this is what we expect out of your first years. Do look over it when you have the chance, Principal, and don't disappoint us. The woman looked ready to leave, but she stopped and then turned to look back at him. By the way, one of your first year's Shinsu. Izuku's ears perked as he stared down at the woman with piqued interest now. He has an animal we at the HPSC are interested in. We heard rumors of this cat holding some sort of healing quirk, or even intelligence that could rival yours. However, when we did a home visit this morning, it appears the cat got lost. You wouldn't happen to know where the creature could be, do you? Izuku's eyes narrowed as he stared at this woman. His ears suddenly flattened against his head as his fur bristled angrily. Oh, I've heard of poor Shinsu's misfortune regarding little Moss. As for where Moss could be, I haven't the slightest clue, I'm afraid, Madam President. You always had a soft spot for other animals. The woman looked at Nedzu out of the corner of her eye before humming and just walking off without another word. What she said was clear as day, at least to Izuku. I don't believe you. Izuku stayed in that tree for a good 15 minutes after she left just to be completely safe. Then, when he was sure she was gone, he jumped down to the ground and patted to Nedzu, who was finally finishing up his business looking at the dorms and was now reading the folder handed to him. Not good, Moss. Nedzu hummed as he thumbed through the pages. Not good at all. I can't see anybody being happy with this, not the teachers nor the students. But I suppose Nedzu shut the folder with a soft thwack of the thin material. This is a meeting for Monday. For now, I have a few more things that need to be done. Come along. He extended his arm out and Izuku jumped up onto the stout's shoulder. Things to do and places to go. Today was going to be a busy one. Izuku could feel it. Working overtime, the teachers were. At 9 in the morning, Hazashi, Oboro, and Shouta had to each get up and dress up. All three of them were in suits and made to look presentable. Hazashi did voice a little protest at the suit, but he knew that not every parent would like him in a skirt suit. That didn't stop him from dabbing on a little makeup though. Shouta had to shave. He didn't like that. He quite liked his stubble. Thank you very much. But here was watching his stubble sprinkle around the sink as his lower face was full of shaving cream. The only one semi-okay with this was Oboro, who got to put his long wavy hair up in a ponytail and had an excuse to wear that expensive cologne he bought on impulse a while back. By the end of it, they were dressed nicely, looked presentable with all three of them having their hair in ponytails and smelling exquisite. All right, one last time. Who is who? Shouta asked as they looked over the addresses. I have Uraraka's Ida, Asui, Todoroki, Kaminari, and Kuda. Oboro stretched his arms above his head. I have Ajiro, Shiro, Takoyami, Bakugo, Sadu, and Kirishima. Hazashi said next with a yawn. Then that leaves me with Jiru, Yagarazu, Shaoji, Ashido, Hagakure, and Monoma. Shouta nodded, just thankful that he didn't have all of Class 1B. That's all Vlad, and Vlad had to talk to all 19 families, poor fellow. Shouta cracked his neck from side to side as he prepared himself. Hopefully we'll all be done by lunch. Hitoshi, who's been sitting on the couch watching TV with Eri, peeked over at his fosters. What's going on? He asked with a smile. You guys look nice. Thank you. Hazashi gently touched the bun on the back of his head with a smile. We have to go and talk to the other parents to get them to agree with the dorms. Shouta explained while he gave his phone a quick glance. You've already been accepted because ... but we need to get permission from the others. Hitoshi gave a soft frown. Yaoyorozu's parents might not agree so willingly. He whispered the last part and ducked down when Shouta looked up at him. Why do you say that? You didn't hear how they yelled at her last night. Hitoshi's voice turned into a mumble while he pressed his face against the back of the couch. I mean, she did sneak out, but some of the things they said were borderline uncalled for. That made Shouta frown. Well, I have her parents, and let me tell you, I'm persuasive when I need to be, he told Hitoshi confidently. Now, watchery while we're gone. We should, hopefully, be back by 1. Okay, stay safe. Hitoshi smiled at them while waving. We will. All three of them spoke in tandem, which made Eri giggle. The three of them then swept out of the house, making sure to lock the front door as they did so. Aburo hopped on a cloud. All right, good luck you two. He gave his two husbands a two-fingered salute before he zoomed away. Good thing we have 2 cars, Hazashi said while he twirled his keys on his index finger. Yeah, see you later and good luck. Good luck. Shouta didn't know what made him go to the Monomas first and foremost, but here he was sitting on their couch while Mrs. Monoma was serving him tea. Nito was sitting on the couch next to his father. The Monomas come from money, old money from what Shouta knows personally. He also knew that both of his parents were heroes, but more passive heroes. His father's a rescue hero and his mother an on-site counselor for those that suffered from villain attacks. It was clear, at least to Shouta, that Nito got his looks from his father. In fact, if he would have put Nito up against his mother, Shino, Shouta wouldn't have thought they were related at all. Shino Monoma looked more akin to Eri. Her hair was long and white in color and her eyes a deep shade of red, the very same as Eri. Shino had freckles all over her face, arms, and legs, and when she smiled it was clear that Nito had gotten that from her. She was tall too, taller than Shouta as she was almost 7 foot. Then there was Nito's father, Yuichi. Nito was Yuichi's clone. They had the same light blonde hair, gray-blue eyes, white irises, and even the same eye shape. Shino Monoma made sure her skirt was under her as she sat on the couch next to her son and husband. So, you want my little sunshine in these new dorms of yours? Shino asked while she sipped her tea gingerly. Shouta picked up his own tea. He preferred coffee, but they offered him tea and it would be rude to refuse. Yes, Shouta blew on the tea to cool it down before he took a sip. It was hot, but nothing he wasn't already used to. Given what happened last night, we figured it would be the best for, not just Nito, but to the students as whole. I don't know. Shino whispered and placed her teacup down. I can't watch my little sunshine if he's away. She then cradled her hand to her cheek while she thought about it. It could be too much freedom. Nito was absolutely sweating. It was clear to Shouta that Nito was holding back something on his tongue, and probably for the best. Dear, we did talk about giving the children some freedom when they get older. Yuichi spoke, never once looking up from his tea. Nito is the oldest, therefore he should get more freedom. Shino hummed in thought while she looked at Shouta. Your son is friends with mine, is that correct? Yes. Let me ask you something. After what happened last night, do you still let your son run around? Of course, Shouta didn't even hesitate. But this isn't about my son. It's about yours, and let me tell you something, ma'am. Nito, while being away from you, isn't gaining more freedom. The students can't leave without permission slips from their teachers. Not only that, but Nito will still be doing his studies and his training. You can rest assured, ma'am. Your son will be safe with us and he won't be running amok or anything you may fear. Shino looked at her reflection in the tea before she sighed and looked at Nito. I suppose people out there are just so rotten, and I don't want him being hurt the way I was when I was younger. He will be safe, Shouta reiterated softly. You have my word. Nito is my responsibility, and as long as I'm alive, I'll protect him with my life. Shino sighed and patted Nito's hair. All right, I can see it in your eyes. She spoke to her son. You want to be in a dorm with your friends. You are to check in with me every week. Do I make myself clear? Yes, mother. Good. She cupped his cheek and then caressed it with her thumb. Now, why don't you go and check on your younger siblings? Of course. Nito got up and then bowed to Shouta. Thank you for dropping by. I'll see you on Monday. He was so proper it was almost like Shouta was looking at a different kid. There was no way this was the kid that would yell and scream at others with such bravado it made others and want to laugh nervously. When Nito was gone, Shino looked at Shouta. She looked like she wanted to say something. Then, she did, and it made Shouta look at her in surprise. Last night ... is what Nito told me. Correct. That they were chased by a cadaver. Shouta's throat suddenly felt dry. I wouldn't call him a cadaver, ma'am. Shouta then scratched at his face. But I wouldn't call him alive either. I heard the boy was once quirkless ... that your son told mine that. The boy killed himself and was brought back to life by his father. Shino looked at Yuichi, who reached over and patted her hand. Dear, there's no way, Yuichi tried to say, but Shino shook her head while looking at Shouta. I'll have to talk to Hitoshi about giving out information like that. Shouta grumbled. But yes, it's true. The kid, his name was Izuku Midoriya. Do you ... know him? No, Shino whispered while looking at her slippers. I think. Never mind. It doesn't matter. And she waved Shouta off. You have other places to go, I'm sure. Let me sign what needs to be signed. She almost seemed to demand, and he handed the papers over for her to do so. Once Shino signed, she sighed heavily like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. I'm holding you to your promise. Of course, and I meant every word. She smiled. I know you did. Shouta might have been putting off Yaoyorozu until the very end out of unease. He talked to the other families and nobody really gave up too much of a fuss. Though there were obvious questions that he was more than happy to answer, but eventually he couldn't put it off anymore, and soon, Shouta was sitting on Yaoyorozu's couch with a cup of coffee in front of him. Mrs. Yaoyorozu, Chika Yaoyorozu, and Mr. Yaoyorozu, Ryushi Yaoyorozu sat in front of him. Momo Yaoyorozu was nowhere to be seen, which was telling Shouta something. We really do want to apologize for the trouble our daughter may have caused last night. We can assure you, she has been punished for sneaking out. Yes, well, we're not here to talk about that. I'm here to ask for your permission to allow Momo in the dorms. Shouta swallowed and his throat itched from being so dry. Chika Yaoyorozu actually raised her nose slightly at this. I see. Are these dorms unisex? Well, the girls will have their own side. It was a little white lie. While the girls did have their own side, the right side, the boys were still right across the way and they all shared a common room and kitchen. Chika huffed sharply while she sat all prim and proper. Their own side, huh? But the girls do not have their own dorm. They share one dorm with the boys. Yes, Shouta said in a soft voice, and Chika looked like she was currently sucking on a lemon. I see. You see, I wouldn't have much of a problem if it weren't for that boy. That boy that clearly has been trying to get into my daughter's pants. Rest assured, ma'am, there will be no sexual intercourse happening in these dorms. We have preventive measurements in place. In fact, why don't you tell me the boy in question and why you think he'll be trying to get with Momo so we can make sure they won't be on the same floor? Shouta inquired, trying to find a medium ground between the two of them. It's that Monoma boy, she snarled. He's ruining my daughter's life because he wants to get with her. I'm telling you. He stopped her from interning with Yuanbai, someone he explicitly told her she should intern with, and instead she went to a man by the name of Fatcom of all names. Chika exhaled sharply. Ryushi cut in quickly. You see, Yuanbai was supposed to show Momo how to be a hero and a celebrity. Next thing we know, she's coming home talking about how she's supposed to eat more because of her quirk. Her father scoffed. We put a stop to that nonsense and grounded her for not going with Yuanbai. Regardless, that Monoma boy is ruining her. We don't want him near our daughter anymore. Besides, we all know the Monomas come from dirty money. Ryushi chuckled darkly. Isn't that the truth? Mrs. Monoma in particular has villain roots instilled in her. Shouta only blinked. That's all? He asked. Yes, get him away from her. In fact, take him out of one and we'll sign the papers. Shouta straightened himself up a little. You have my word. I will do everything in my power to ensure your daughter's safety and well-being once you sign the papers, he told them. Chika smiled at this. I knew you were a sensible man, Mr. Aizawa. Papers. Shouta had to hold his own smile back as he pushed the papers towards Chika and Ryushi. I won't lie, Chika finished signing and pushed the papers towards her husband. I was a little worried about that purple-haired boy as well, that Hiroshi fellow. Shouta's eyes narrowed. I've seen him in ballet how he always chooses her as a partner over the others, but I found out he mainly keeps to himself. Not only that, but once I saw him in a skirt it became clear what he was. I'm going to stop you there. Shouta raised his hand to stop Chika before she said something she was going to regret. Hitoshi is my son, so why don't we just stop right there? Yeah, Chika blinked in shock. Right, let's stop there. Is that everything? Yes, I believe that is. Shouta stood and then bowed. Thank you for having me, and remember, she'll be in the dorms in 3 days' time, so make sure she packs. Of course, and thank you for getting rid of that boy. Chika led Shouta towards the door. Shouta saw Momo standing in the living room doorway. She was pressed against the door frame. Their eyes locked and she looked afraid for a second. Afraid and sad because she figured she was losing someone who was helping her come out of her shell. When they locked eyes, Shouta gave her a tiny smile and then a wink. Like I said, your daughter is safe with me, ma'am. What a wonderful logical ruse. He thought with joy. Perhaps this was his best one yet. So, the time has come. Nedzu sat across from Dabai. Moss was sitting on Nedzu's shoulder and was watching the man very cautiously. We have good news. Yeah, Dabai grumbled while he tapped nervously on the table in front of him. The jail healers were doing a decent job at healing his burns, but Nedzu was sure he would never be fully healed. Tamura Shigaraki has been caught. That is good, so you don't need a spy. Nedzu shook his head. We do still need a spy. However, it's been yanked out of my hands by the HPSC, so we can no longer use you as a spy. Oh, then why do you still have that glint in your eye? Dabai inquired. What are you planning? Do you want Toga to go to her parents? Of course not. Take it from someone who was abused. I'd rather she'd live on the streets than with those fuckers. Dabai snarled at Nedzu. Nedzu smiled. I'm offering you and twice one final deal. Don't worry, it's nothing as intense as being a spy. He leaned down and opened a briefcase. You see, I've been thinking about it for a while and Oh, how do I word this? I don't like the HPSC, you see. And after what I've received today by their oh so glorious Madam President, I finally found a way to get under their skin. Here it is. Nedzu slapped a paper down and then put it up against the glass separating them. Damn, I read it. Then, his eyes widened as he read it again and then again just to be doubly sure he was reading this right. Now, this offer has already been given to Ms. Toga, who has taken the offer up with glee. You think you can reform us? Dabai quietly asked. We're villains, the bad guys, and you think you can fix us? Fix? Oh no, I think you're misunderstanding, Dabai. I'm not trying to fix you, or Jin, or young Toga. I want to help. I'm not asking you to ever see things from our side or things. I'm simply asking for help. Not only that, but you'll have food and board. Both you and Jin and someone else if I can get him to talk to me. Dabai looked skeptical. Help? From the bad guys? How? We want your help in helping my students understand what makes a villain a villain. As it stands, a lot of my students really just see villains as generic bad guys that one could see during Saturday morning cartoons. They need to see that villains are people with thoughts and feelings, and before you ask, Toga will not be involved unless she wishes to be. Toga was granted a spot in general education and is now a ward of UA. She will continue her education with us for the next 3 years, and as far as anyone is concerned, she's quirkless. She agreed to all of this willingly. I did not twist her arm. Dabai still looked distrustful before he gave a sigh. There's more. I can see it written on her face. Nedzu smiled. Perhaps, just maybe, if all goes well and you and Jin follow my rules to the letter and everything works as it should and my students don't get harmed, then we can talk about taking down a certain hero for his abuse. Dabai's eyes snapped to attention. How? Oh, look at the time. Nedzu stood up and gave Moss a little scratch. Do we have a deal? I must get going to feed my animals. Aren't you also? Dabai decided it wasn't worth it as he waved Nedzu off. Fine, you win. We'll try it your way. But I need to know you're not gonna take this back, are you? You aren't gonna double-cross us. Young Taoya. I'm appalled. I would never double-cross Himiko's 2 older brothers in rehabilitation. I'll see you in a few days when the dorms are complete. Oh, and expect a visit from Recovery Girl. She can't heal everything, but maybe she'll heal enough that you don't need to staple yourself together. Nedzu then left and Moss perked his ears up. What's the point of all that, exactly? Moss asked once they were outside. The point. Nedzu sighed and looked at the sky above. If I didn't get my hands on them, with those quirks, Jin and Taoya would have surrendered to the HPSC without a doubt. They're already villains, and being forced to work under such people would only reinforce their belief in villains and heroes alike. So, I think I found a middle ground. Besides, I think Endeavor has been number 2 for just a little too long, don't you? Absolutely. Izuku mewed in agreement. Good. Now, then I hope you're excited. Excited? Once the dorms are fully up and everyone moved in, you're going right back to Hitoshi. You've been found, so to say. Bonus. And Ko shyly peeked at the boy that was talking with Ray. A boy with half and half hair, half silver and half red. He had a scar over his left eye that was pretty bad. He was handsome, almost prince-like, and just looking at him made Inko long to hold on to Izuku. Inko tried to read her book, but she just kept stealing glances at the boy. He was so close to Izuku's age it was almost unfair. He laughed with Ray and Ray laughed back with him. The boy then took out his phone to show Ray some pictures. Was it fate that led Kikayo down that same path? That had the curious woman look at the boy's phone as she passed. And Ko didn't know ... but in the end she would be strangely glad it happened. Kikayo stopped dead and the woman, still knowing no manners, snatched the phone. Hey, the boy yelled, thinking her to be a phone thief, and instantly Inko got up. It really wasn't any of her business. Not my circus, not my monkeys, her mother would say when something would happen that didn't involve her directly. But Inko wasn't her mother. Kikayo, she scolded the woman while she marched up. I am so sorry about her, Shoto. Ray quickly apologized on Kikayo's behalf. The 4 of them circled her, but it became clear she wasn't trying to steal the boy Shoto's cell phone. She was just looking at it. Kikayo ran her fingers over the screen as her eyes misted up. Then she looked at Shoto as tears suddenly started to escape her eyes. Who is this? She demanded while pushing the phone back into Shoto's face. Inko looked at the picture. It was a picture of a boy. The boy was in a UA cheerleading uniform. Really? They got cheerleaders now? He was clearly in a skirt and crop top. The boy had lavender hair that had its own mind as it stood up in unruly waves. It was clear, at least to Inko, the boy wasn't paying attention or didn't even know he was having his picture taken, as he wasn't focused on the camera. The strangest thing, he had this cat on his shoulder. It was an emerald green cat, how rare. But, those eyes. The cat was focused on the camera. The animal almost looked surprised. Those eyes. That's just my friend. Shoto snatched the phone back from Kikayo. Now, please, leave us alone, hey. Inko wasn't even aware she was using her quirk to bring the phone to her. Shoto threw his hands up in frustration at this, but Inko wasn't even paying attention to him. She held the phone in her hands and just stared at it. Stared at that cat and those eyes. I know those eyes. Those vibrant green eyes. Mom, come on. It's time. 4-year-old Izuku grabbed his mother and pulled on her arm like the impatient child he is. Come on, come on. I'm going crazy, she thought as she continued to stare at the shocked face of this cat. It's just a cat. Inko, dear, please give my son his phone back, Ray encouraged while Kikayo was still crying as she too was looking at the picture. Inko felt tears build up behind her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered as she, with shaky hands, reached out to give the phone back. That cat just looked so familiar. I know those eyes. Those vibrant emerald eyes. Oh, Shoto perked at this. Have you seen this cat then? You see, he belongs to my friend here and he went missing a while back and my friend, Shinsu, has been upset since. And he showed Inko the picture again. Shinsu, Kikayo whispered in a gasping breath. I knew it. She took a step back before tearing up again. It's him. It's my son. I never thought Those eyes look so much like Izuku's. That cat, he looks like. Stop it. Inko grabbed onto her long hair and turned away violently from the phone. I haven't seen that cat. Her lower lip wobbled. I'm glad you found your son again, Kikayo. I'll never get to hold mine again. She then walked away with her head low while hiccuping. She needed some time alone to think about things. Those damn eyes. Stepping into the dorms was a sight for everyone in 1A. They all stepped inside and took in the luxurious sights before them. Hitoshi did a full 360 while he glanced every which way. Wow, and they got this up so fast. Denki whispered next to Hitoshi while grinning. This is bigger than the apartment complex we live in. Achako whispered next in complete awe. This common room is bigger than my apartment. It really is a sight to behold, isn't it? Monoma asked while looking up at the ceiling and all the floors above them. The question is, why are there so many floors and dorms for one class? Better safe than sorry. Hitoshi could only shrug. Exactly that, young Hitoshi. Everyone turned at Nedzu's voice, the principal walking in with a smile and a cup of tea in his hands. The hero course can always go either way. You could gain or you could lose. So, we felt better safe than sorry about the amount of rooms. Shouta came in after Nedzu and spoke. Now, while here we expect nothing but the best out of all you, understood? The main dorm rules are posted on the kitchen door and fridge. We expect you all to follow them. The teachers will be living in the apartments roughly 5 minutes from here should you need anything. Yes, that included them as well. They were still packing their stuff to move into the apartments. It did kind of suck having to move out of that house. Everyone loved that house, but it was for the best. The apartment certainly wasn't as big as the house, but it was still more than enough as it was just a 2-bedroom apartment. Seeing how Hitoshi had a dorm now. Let's see, is there anything else? Nedzu asked Shouta. Just stay on your best behavior. I understand there are a lot of mismatching personalities amongst you all and that butting heads are bound to happen naturally. Someone that sounded suspiciously like Zero coughed Monoma, which caused a few of them to break off into giggles. Don't be upset that you don't have half of my intelligence. Monoma snarked back without hesitation. A perfect example as any, I suppose. Shouta shook his head. Regardless, no fighting is to be had in these dorms. Any and all physical fights will be punished with no exceptions. Understood? Yes, sir. Everyone yelled at once. There was a moment where it seemed like the teachers were done and everyone was going to do their own thing when suddenly Nedzu spoke again. Oh right, before I forget. Nedzu was already at the door by the time everyone turned to look at him. Hitoshi, I happened to run into someone on my way here and he opened the door. There was a loud meow as Moss came trotting, almost running but not quite, and with no hesitation. First his meow was standard, then when he saw Hitoshi it became deeper and more frantic sounding. Moss. Hitoshi ran to his cat with open arms and Moss didn't hesitate as he jumped into Hitoshi's arms and then started to rub himself all over Hitoshi's neck. You smell nothing like me. It's been weeks, what did you expect? Still, Moss didn't let up until he rubbed himself under Hitoshi's chin and was pleased with how Hitoshi smelt now. Hitoshi pulled Izuku off of his shoulder and held him like a baby. Instantly Moss started to purr loudly at this. Yes, now then your rooms have already been picked out. Go and get yourselves settled in. Shouta demanded while he shooed them away with a wave of his hand. Hitoshi's room was on the 2nd floor and he was sandwiched between Takoyami and Aoyama. Two very opposing personalities for sure, but it wasn't unwelcomed for Hitoshi as Takoyami has proven before to be good company. And Aoyama ... maybe Hitoshi could get used to his sparkly persona. Their rooms were already ready by the time they got to the dorms as everyone had to send in what they wanted to bring with them. Hitoshi really wasn't expecting his room to already be made up. He figured he had to put everything up. But nope, the movers had his whole room just the way he liked it. Moss, who was still being cradled by Hitoshi, let out a mew once they were alone. My wheel, he exclaimed and wriggled out of Hitoshi's grasp. Hitoshi smiled as he put Moss down and his friend ran to the exercise wheel with glee. He wasted no time running along the wheel, letting it spin and clatter loudly as he did so. Hitoshi watched him and just smiled before he sat on his freshly made bed. Everything was just the way he liked it. He looked over at Izuku, who must have felt or noticed his stare because Izuku stopped his running and looked over his shoulder at Hitoshi. Is everything okay? Izuku asked through the mind link before he jumped up on the bed with ease. I need to tell you something. It's about what happened between Nais and I, Hitoshi whispered softly. I've been dreading this conversation, but I figured it's best to rip the band-aid off now. He then rubbed at his forehead as he contemplated his next move. Right, you never did get back to me about that. What happened? And why did you cut me off so abruptly from the mind link? Izuku questioned as he put his paw on Hitoshi's hand. Hitoshi looked at that tiny kitty cat paw and for the briefest of moments it looked like a normal human hand up top his own hand. But it would revert back into a cat paw upon a second glance. Hitoshi sighed and looked away. The mind link has been compromised. It's how Nais found out I was at the movies that night. It's why or part of the reason why I cut you off the way I had. I couldn't risk him getting any more information and I didn't want you to panic. Hitoshi scratched at his head. So, I guess until a solution is found we shouldn't say anything that may give our location away, nor should we talk about any sensitive material. Hitoshi whispered while he reached over and patted between Moss's ears. Damn him. Moss's ears went flat with irritation. He would then cock his head towards Hitoshi's forlorn face. Why do I feel that there's more? Because there isn't. Hitoshi sighed deeply. It was a sigh that he clearly felt from deep in his soul. Oh God, Izuku Moss, they wanted me. They wanted to kidnap me and the others and I were running. I look back and he was coming after me on all fours and next thing I know I've fallen and he's on top of me and he used his fucking quirk on me again. He turned into me and Hitoshi shuddered. I was just so afraid that I hit him with a rebar and he hardly flinched. Hitoshi's breath picked up rapidly and nearly hitched in fear as he knew what was coming next. Moss said nothing. He just watched and waited for Hitoshi to continue. Oh God, I just wanted him to leave us alone, Moss, but he wouldn't. Even after I smacked him twice, even after he compared me to my uncle, even after all of that he was still stepping up to me like we were friends. He cut himself off, which made Moss tilt his head in confusion. I thought how can I get him to hate me? I mean actually hate me, to leave me alone. Why do I feel like I might not like where this is going? Because you won't. Hitoshi then stared at his slippers. ITHOUGHT:// What would make you hate someone? He whispered. Because he thinks he's you. So, I called him a slur. More specifically, I called him a no. Moss shook his head and Hitoshi could sense his disappointment. Oh Hitoshi. No, Hitoshi cut him off. Let me finish, because that's not the worst. Hitoshi knew if maybe he just finished it there then Izuku may just be disappointed. So he needed to hear it all before he casted judgment. He was shocked. Hell, I think the others were shocked to hear me say such a slur. While he was shocked, I attacked him again. I started yelling. I think the term is unhinged with how I was yelling. Hell, I can't even remember half of what I said as I was just so panicked. The gist of it. I told him I'd never be his friend. Then oh God, I need to say this about what's coming next. I did not and do not mean it. But I told him that I was glad he jumped. I didn't mean it. I just wanted him to leave me alone and I just kept hitting him with that stupid rebar to the point that he backed away and had his arm out to stop me from hitting him. Once he was on feet he started to cry. He was sobbing. Hitoshi couldn't look at Moss. He knew he couldn't handle the look he would be given if he did, so he just kept looking at his slippers. I didn't even know he could cry. And well, I got my wish. He told me he hated me and ran off. And now, I suppose you must hate me too. Hitoshi did not expect to get smacked by Moss. It didn't hurt, but that didn't make it any less shocking. Let's get one thing straight. I will never hate you. Sure, I may get upset, but never hate. You are my human and I understand you greatly. Don't forget that. I, unlike Nais, am intelligent enough to realize that you were scared and making a rash choice out of that fear. That being said, I can also see that you did go too far in such a fearful state, and for that I feel like I need to do something to show my anger. Then Hitoshi was swatted at his face again. Again, it hardly hurt. Bad. That's it. Forgiven just like that. Moss just shrugged. That's all I could think of, really. While I don't agree with how you reacted and how your response was disgusting to say the least, the most I can ask of you is, don't ever do it again. Do you think you can do that? Hitoshi didn't even need to think about it. He nodded. Trust me, I learned my lesson. I keep seeing his scared face, those tearful eyes. Hitoshi sighed and put his face on his knees. I almost want to apologize to him if I can, as weird as that sounds. But I can't. At least, I can't apologize to Nais. I can, however, apologize to you. I'm sorry, he whispered to Moss, and Moss's ears flickered for a moment. Then he snorted softly. You're forgiven, feel better. A little. I'm just glad to get it all off of my chest. It's been eating me up since it happened. I bet. You made him cry. It was more a repeat than anything when Moss spoke. He wasn't being cruel, just reflecting on the sentence. And he said he hated you. That's not a good thing. Because you know who else he hates? Bakugo and All Might. Yep. And he wants to murder them. And something tells me I may have just shot up that list to number 1 because of what I did, and you know what? I deserve it. It was time for finals, and everyone was studying their butts off to get a passing grade. The thing about the heroic course is that finals come in 2 waves. The written finals every teacher gives out, and then there's the real final exam. Monoma heard through the grapevine that they'd all be fighting robots, which sucks for Hitoshi as he had a non-combative quirk. Still, he held on to the hope that maybe he could still earn rescue points, and if anything he knew he could take fallen parts of the robot and use them as weapons in the worst case. The nights were filled with people pulling all-nighters in the dorms studying like no tomorrow. Momo even held tutoring sessions during these late nights. It was hectic with little sleep and early mornings. The day came before they all knew it. Tests were handed out and anti-cheat measures were put in place. For some reason, Moss was not allowed to be with Hitoshi during this time. Hitoshi totally knew why, but the others didn't. Everyone worked diligently until the time was up. There were people trying desperately to write even after time was called. Hitoshi would later learn that he passed the written tests with flying colors, along with everyone else, the lowest grade in class being a C from Denki. And now the real final exam as everyone got dressed in their hero costumes. The air was quiet, almost somber, as they all felt a feeling of unease. That was until... "What's that?" Denki excitedly asked Hitoshi, making nearly everyone jump at the loudness of his voice. Hitoshi just looked at him with wide and startled eyes. Denki simply pointed to the voice modifier in his hands. "Oh, this. I got the support course to make it a while back. I guess they finally made it. I gave it a test run and it's supposed to change my voice." See, Hitoshi put it on over his mouth and made sure it fit well before he started to fiddle with the dials. "What the fuck do you nerds want?" Hitoshi demanded in a perfect mimic of Bakugo's voice. This, of course, startled Bakugo. Hitoshi fiddled around the dials again before he spoke again. "I'm better than all of you and I'm going to prove it by being loud," he said in a pretty close replica of Monoma's voice in a much calmer tone. Monoma snorted and then pulled on Hitoshi's ear gently. "You know it's true. Also thanks for the quirk." This time Hitoshi snorted before he put the voice modifier down. Regardless, he spoke in a normal voice. "It was decided that this will help me get the drop on people." "Yes, but Monoma inspected it. Will it help against robots?" he said with a smirk which made Hitoshi roll his eyes. "I don't think we're fighting robots, dude. It feels too easy," Hitoshi admitted as he continued getting dressed. He hopped into his pants and then his shirt. "This all feels off," Hitoshi explained. The others mumbled whether or not they believed him, but in the end it didn't matter, as once they were all dressed they were led out of the locker rooms and into a building just shy of all the simulation buildings. "Hello," Nedzu greeted them all. "Principal Nedzu." Everyone cheered at once, as they always liked to do. And Moss, Kaminari joined in once they saw Moss sitting on Nedzu's shoulder. Moss, everyone, minus a few of the saner students, cheered just a little louder than how they would have cheered for Nedzu. "Ouch," Hitoshi noticed with a laugh, but Nedzu seemed unbothered. Soon, out came Mr. Aizawa and the other teachers. A couple of teachers looked uneasy about what was going to happen, and seeing Aburo's frown, it made the hairs on the back of Hitoshi's neck stand on end. His gut feeling was right. They were not to be fighting robots. No, they were fighting the teacher. Each teacher is chosen specifically for each pair of students. 10 teachers versus 20 students. On the board was displayed who would fight who. Aoyama and Monoma versus 13. Mina and Kaminari versus Nedzu. Asui and Takoyami versus Ectoplasm. Uraraka and Bakugo versus All Might. Hitoshi had to do a double take at that last one just to be sure he was reading that right. They wanted Ochako and Bakugo to go up against All Might. "That's just unfair," Hitoshi muttered to himself before he shook his head and looked over at Ochako. Ochako looked pale as she kept rereading the line over and over again like she was hoping it would change, but it didn't. Hitoshi looked to see who he was up against. Shinsu and Ida versus Loud Cloud. Hitoshi could only think as he reread that. Yep, he was ... he was going to be fighting one of his foster dads. Obviously not a mistake. It was intentional that they wanted someone that knew how Hitoshi quirk worked to put them at an advantage. He was also going to be working with Ida. Hitoshi didn't dislike it, but he wasn't a fan either. He and Ida were, well, they weren't anything. He didn't know Ida. Again, something else that felt intentional. Still, as bad as Hitoshi felt for having to fight Aburo, and it was clear by the frown on Aburo's face he felt the same way, it has to be done. One team at a time, and when they were out on the field they had 15 minutes to come up with a plan. They could either capture their teacher or they could escape through one of the Nedzu exits located at the end of the city. The teachers were handicapped with weights on their ankles and wrists, so the students at least had a fair chance. All Might himself had to wear 8 of these handicaps to keep it fair, 2 on each wrists and 2 on each ankle. Hitoshi still felt that wouldn't be enough. And before they knew it, the finals started with each match being randomized to keep the students on their toes. The first up, Takoyami and Tsu versus Ectoplasm. "Good luck," Hitoshi shouted after Takoyami while waving goodbye to him. "We'll be right here when you win." Takoyami turned slightly pink. I haven't even started yet. You can't say that I'll win. I know you will. After all, I knew you would get into the hero course, didn't I? Hitoshi winked playfully at Takoyami. Dark Shadow came out and sniggered at his host's face that was now starting to bristle, but not in an angry way. Come on, Tsu grabbed Takoyami's arm and started to drag him away. We have very little time to plan and I don't want to waste any of it. All right, coming. Then they vanished to their fighting zone. Everyone could watch on TV as the fight went down. A bit of entertainment, Hitoshi guessed. I supposed it's you and I, Shinsu. Ida came up to him. Yes, I suppose so. Hitoshi whispered almost nervously. I won't lie to you, Ida, I'm unnerved about fighting my foster father. The two of them sat on the floor as they quietly spoke. I'm willing to bet that's why they're doing it. Well, that and they want us prepared for fighting against villains who won't show mercy. Ida hummed. I can't fault you. I'm sure if I were forced to face up against Tensei, my older brother, I probably would be unnerved as well. It doesn't feel fair, however, villains won't play fair. This time Hitoshi hummed while thinking about how this was going to play out. I know a bit about Aburo's quirk, but not a whole lot. Really, between him and my other two dads his quirk is rarely talked about, mainly because Papa Hazashi has the flashiest quirk out of all of them. I don't even know if Aburo's quirk has a drawback. Well, let's talk about weaknesses then, personality-wise. And so they would. Hitoshi explained what he could while Ada listened and took everything in. They talked for so long and so in-depth that Hitoshi didn't hear the announcement that Takoyami and Tsu had won. He did hear cheering from the others but didn't think too hard about it. He'll probably be on a cloud, maybe patrolling the area. I don't know. Hitoshi shut his eyes. Boss, sorry, Toshi. I want to help you, but if we're caught using the mind link you'll be failed for cheating. But I can give you one hint while the adults are distracted. Aburo cares for you a lot. That's all. Thanks for trying, and that's not a hint, it's a fact. Perhaps. Hitoshi leaned back and tapped his boot impatiently. The next set of people had to go, Aoyama and Monoma. I hope you fail. Hitoshi joked as Monoma walked past him. Monoma flipped him off. I see how it is. You just don't want me at the camp because you know I will destroy you. You don't even know what the camp is about. Have you no dignity? Hitoshi, he's your friend and classmate. You need to build him up, not tear him down. And you. Ida chopped at Monoma. Do not use such vulgar hand gestures. Ida started to chop his hand and Monoma waved him off. Calm down, you cyborg. It's all in good fun. Honestly, take the stick out of your butt. Then Monoma retreated with Aoyama. Ida blushed. I do not have a stick in my butt. Hitoshi smiled a little at that as he brought his knees to his chest. Of course not, Ida. That's why you're not bitter about Mossy being vice rep. You guys voted for a cat. Ida yelled while he raised his hand to chop it at Hitoshi, but he paused and thought better of it. It made Hitoshi giggle behind his hand. Can't you see that Moss isn't a normal cat, Ada? Ada huffed a little. I'll admit he's smarter than I originally gave him credit for. We've gone off subject. Ada sighed and gave his head a shake. Now, back to Mr. Loud Cloud and maybe any potential weakness. No, we've discussed that enough. I'm actually curious. You mentioned your brother. What's he do? Hitoshi changed the subject, making Ada blush a little. My brother. Why ... he's Ingenium. Ada beamed suddenly with pride. The Ingenium. Izuku sat in Aburo's lap while the two of them watched Aoyama and Monoma go off against 13. Monoma and Aoyama were clinging to a wall for dear life as 13 tried to suck them up. Well, Aoyama turned to Monoma and said something. Whatever it was, it made Monoma let go of the wall and go flying towards 13. 13 immediately turned her quirk off in fear of sucking the teenager up into her black hole. Monoma, when he was about to make contact with her, twisted up the air and grabbed her wrist. It happened so fast that Izuku honestly had a hard time following, but Monoma had, while in the air, used Bakugo's quirk with his free hand to propel himself back and knock her off of her feet and send her falling back. Then he activated Kaminari's quirk to give her a little shock. A shock that would cause her suit to lose all function so he could cuff her with ease. Aoyama, Yuka, and Monoma Nito have won against 13. Aoyama said something behind his hand as he giggled at Monoma. Monoma, in response, did what he did best. He over-exaggerated his facial features and started to yell at Aoyama before flipping him off and storming away. Oof, I wonder what Aoyama said that caused that reaction. Aburo hummed while he continued to pet and stroke Izuku. Last time I saw that crazy face was when he was in 1B. Aburo, shout aside while he approached his husband. You're up next. Aburo gave a solemn nod before he put Izuku on the table. Wish me luck, Mossy. I hope you fail. Izuku yawned loudly, going as far as to stick his tongue all the way out. Then, Aburo vanished to go and get ready. Izuku noticed that a few teachers were watching him and he knew why. It was no secret about the mind link, at least between the teachers. So, they were making sure Izuku wasn't helping Hitoshi cheat. As much as Izuku hated it, the most he could do was curl up and take a nap. Nice and friendly. Nap, and nothing more, and maybe give his friend a little more of a heads up. Hitoshi, your turn is up. Good luck. And please remember, Oboro cares for you a lot. Okay, thanks, Mossy. Hitoshi and Ada were placed inside of ground beta for their mission, to capture Oboro or to get out safely through a Nenzu gate. Hitoshi didn't want to fight Oboro, and it seemed that Ada didn't want to either, so their goal was to get to the Nenzu gate as soon as possible. The issue, they didn't know where the gate was and ground beta was massive. So, the next 15 minutes they planned, we should go through the sewers. Hitoshi whispered, Oboro will be up in the air, and as long as we stay out of his line of sight and stay quiet, he won't be a threat. A good plan, yes, but the sewer system is massive and we could run out of time. The time limit was their enemy, no doubt about it. They had 30 minutes to either capture Oboro or find the exit. It seemed like a lot of time, but in reality it was hardly any time at all, and they should waste time running blind trying to find this stupid exit. The doors opened, which was expected. It meant they had 5 more minutes of rushed planning. Damn, Hitoshi wished more than anything that they had some blueprints. Well, I'm good at running along rooftops, and that would be easier in finding the exit. Buet. Loud Cloud will see us, damn. Together they hurried through the streets. We could try and keep a low profile. Hide in the alleys, it as Ida suggested. They find a tight alley to hide in while they brainstormed. A possibility. Hitoshi gnawed on his lip. He had a feeling it wouldn't be that easy. However, Oboro will probably be patrolling above us. He could still catch us no matter how careful or quiet. Don't forget he married to Mr. Aizawa. He knows how to snuff out those being stealthy. Like this. No sooner had he said it did the show start. A heavy fog fell over them. The day was a beautiful blue and the fog was so thick that they couldn't even see the sky anymore. It was like something out of that video game, Silent Hill, with a fog so dense it blocked their vision and made it impossible for them to see any more than 10 feet in front of them. Doesn't this block off his vision too? Ada whispered so softly that Hitoshi almost didn't hear him. Most likely, yes, but this is his cloud. He can manipulate it to his will, so odds are he's moving it around below him so he can get a clear look. Hitoshi hummed, he loves you a lot. He repeated what Moss had told him, which made Ida give him a strange look. What? Hitoshi shook his head. Don't listen to me. Come on, we're not getting anywhere by standing here. Let's move. So they did. The two of them had to make split-second decisions on which alley they wanted to twist and turn down. Ada stopped Hitoshi when the two of them found themselves out of the alley to run down. No, they were now in front of a main road, and because of the fog, they couldn't see if they were close to the Nenzu gate or not. Then they realized it. Oboro's plan. Hitoshi almost wanted to scoff at himself for not realizing it sooner. He wants us in the main streets. He'd know we'd try the alleyways. With a fog this dense and heavy, he made it so we couldn't cheat. Well, I didn't make it to number 8 for nothing. Oboro laughed from behind them, causing both boys to turn in shock. Oboro was sitting on a cloud and the air around him was completely clear, so he was manipulating the fog so only he could see. Hitoshi might have panicked. Might have, when he thought he had a chance, and he shot his capture weapon out to wrap around Oboro. Oboro leapt from his cloud and above the capture weapon with complete and utter grace. His body looked so limber as he flipped over Hitoshi's pitiful attack and landed on a new cloud while the other dispersed amongst the fog. Honestly, dear, I may not be a ballerina like you and Shouta, but I was still a dancer. That weight, really? What kind? Hitoshi asked, and Oboro opened his mouth to answer with glee. Then he shut it, put his finger to his lips, and shook his head. Nice try, Oboro was saying without saying it. Damn, Hitoshi shook his own head. Ada suddenly tackled Hitoshi and the two of them rolled along the ground. Run, Ada yelled and dragged Hitoshi to his feet. He nearly got you with his clouds while you were distracted. And the two of them ran into the alley again. Pay more attention to your surroundings. Shit, Hitoshi muttered while looking back, but he couldn't see anything because the fog was too dense. He had been too blinded by his friendly foster father to not realize that Oboro would try to stop them before they stopped him. It was a battle after all, and the teachers could stop them. After all, their teachers were villains. They stopped at an alley intersection with Hitoshi breathing heavily for a moment. The thick fog made him start to sweat and feel human. Thank you, he whispered to Ada. I would have lost before we even started if not for you. Ada nodded. We're a team and we need to work together as one. I have your back as long as you have mine. Understood? Ada told him and Hitoshi nodded. Understood. He loves you a lot. Moss's voice echoed in Hitoshi's head again. It's not a hint, it's just a fact. He spoke to himself in a very soft voice. So soft that Ada didn't question him, or if he did, he didn't out loud. Hitoshi bit his lip as he tried to rack his brain. Clouds, Ada called, and Hitoshi looked to see that Oboro was now making clouds to push them out of the alley. Hitoshi grabbed Ada's upper arm and paused for a moment. He loves you. He loves you a lot. Moss's advice just kept replaying in Hitoshi's head, making him think. Ida pulled Hitoshi with him as they ran into the next alleyway, zigzagging from alleyway to alleyway while looking around for a way out, for Nenzu's stupid exit. He loves you a lot. Well, yeah, he's my dad. He's supposed to love me a lot. He's supposed to care for me and love me. He's supposed to pick me up if I Hitoshi felt the spark flicker to life inside his brain as he skidded to a stop, forcing Ida to stop. What? Ida asked. I have a plan. Papa. Oboro, who was looking down at the city as he patrolled the area, turned towards Hitoshi's voice calling him out. Have they decided they wanted to fight? Oboro gripped his staff. He didn't want to go hand to hand with his own son, but he would have to. Papa, Hitoshi called again through the foggy city. It had taken Oboro years to learn how to expand his cloud into a fog to engulf a city. He didn't do it often. He usually kept his clouds, or fog, in a controlled and condensed area, but he couldn't risk them getting to the Nenzu Gate. They were too close when he had managed to get them to turn around. Oboro moved the fog so he could see as he got closer to Hitoshi's voice calling for him. Papa, come out. I know how your quirk works, Hituwu. Oh, Oboro's been duped. The boy calling for him, the boy yelling for him, calling him Papa was not his child. In fact, one would argue that this was Tensei's child. Tensei's child was using Hitoshi's shiny new voice modulator to lure Oboro out into the open. An ambush was set, and by the time Oboro realized it was an ambush, it was too late. He turned to the side just in time to see Hitoshi in the air beside him, and for a very real moment, a moment that Oboro would tell his two husbands about later in the dead of night, he no longer saw that scared and trembling child. The child who couldn't have weighed more than 80 pounds at the age of 14. The boy that would shake when Oboro raised his hand up for a high five. The same boy that fell out of his chair when Hisashi was holding a wooden spoon. This wasn't the same tiny, frail, and scared child. This was a teenager who knew his worth. A teenager with the smarts to show, and a teenager with two glowing purple eyes that would do anything to win this battle. Two ends of a capture weapon wrapped tightly around Oboro's upper body, and he was forced off of his cloud in a violent twist. The two of them then spun in the air. The capture weapon picked up momentum as Hitoshi kept a tight grip on his ends. Because of the weight difference, they continued to spin in a wide circle, with Oboro realizing that he was causing this pinwheel. Hitoshi twisted in the air, and then the two of them were looking at one another while Hitoshi continued to spin the weapon faster and faster. Oboro let out a soft noise as his breath hitched because of the weapon's increasing tightening on his ribcage. Then he was freed. Hitoshi let him go. Oboro's eyes went wide. They were still in the air. Hitoshi was falling towards the ground at a fast rate as he tossed Oboro high above him. Oboro didn't hesitate. He reached out and made a cloud directly under Hitoshi. Then, and only then, did he realize that he's been duped. Again, he felt air beside him and turned just in time to see Ida's leg. Make a cloud and save Hitoshi. Or make a cloud to block Ida. You clever boy. You clever boy. Oboro thought almost fondly just before Ida's leg slammed into his back at full power and speed, the boy clearly having gained momentum, and just like that Oboro was careening towards the ground, but not before a capture scarf wrapped around his arm, and he was saved from the impact. The ground right there. Oboro sighed in relief as he was lowered safely to the ground. Then he was tackled by both boys and cuffed. Ida, Tenya, and Hitoshi Shinsu have won against Loud Cloud. Nenzu cheered. Good job, Oboro whispered as Hitoshi turned to look at him. You found a weakness and you exploited it. Not only that, but I haven't been wrapped up in a capture scarf in well over 5 years, and you managed to do it twice. You both did amazing. Hitoshi started to uncuff Oboro. I can't say it was easy, Hitoshi admitted. I didn't want to go hand to hand, he admitted to Oboro. I think if it came to that, I would have lost. If it makes you feel better, kiddo, I didn't want it to go hand to hand either. Oboro then patted Hitoshi's hair before he cupped his son's cheek. You both did great, and you should be proud of that fact. Oh, you never answered me. What dance did you used to take? Hitoshi asked. No brainwashing, I swear. Oboro looked at him and just smiled. I'll never tell. When Hitoshi and Ida walked into the waiting room, they were met with applause. You guys did amazing. Hitoshi's spinning move was just awesome. Mina clapped Hitoshi on the shoulder before turning to Ida. And you were great too. I loved that kick you did when you just came in like, plow, bam, wham, she exclaimed with glee. The next group was up shortly, and over the crowd Hitoshi almost missed the call. The excitement faded fairly quickly. It was time. Everyone looked towards Ochako and Bakugo. Bakugo already stormed off without her and was making his way down to the battlegrounds. Ochako watched him go. She was shaking. Why, she swallowed hard. Wish me luck, Ochako whispered almost fearfully before she started to walk behind Bakugo, facing the number one hero. And no pressure. Ochako, Hitoshi called to her before he ran up. He pulled her in and whispered so low that only she could hear. Don't question me, aim for All Might's stomach. His? Yes, Hitoshi whispered in a hiss. And make sure Bakugo doesn't get himself killed. Ochako looked back to where Bakugo had retreated. I make no promises on that last one, she said out loud before turning and walking away. Hitoshi watched them go. Good luck. How are we doing this? Ochako inquired while she and Bakugo stepped into ground beta. We need to be smart. I don't need or want your stupid help. Bakugo snarled at her but didn't look back as he kept walking. Just look for the damn exit and stay out of my way. I have business with All Might. He then growled the last part lowly while storming forward. It doesn't involve you. Well, that's too fucking bad. Ochako immediately matched his energy with her own growl and snarl. This made him actually look back at her. I'm here to get a passing grade, same as you. So get your head out of your ass and put your dick away, she demanded before marching past him with ease. We're a team whether you like it or not. Now, you're going to talk to me and we're going to come up with a plan. She then turned so she was directly in front of him. Bakugo growled and he started to grind his teeth in rage. Get out of my way, pink cheeks. This doesn't concern you. But it does, jackass. She roared back at him. This is my grade on the line. She yelled at him and poked him in the chest. I don't know who you think you're raising your voice at. You. I'm raising my voice at you. What? You can dish it out but you can't take it, she demanded, getting right into his face as well. Let me tell you something, Bakugo. I am not afraid of you and I'm not going to back down just because you think you're the best. Newsflash, you're not. Ochako hissed. Bakugo's hand twitched and he nearly raised it, but he thought better of it and Ochako was quick as a whip. A good choice. Ochako narrowed her eyes before turning. A plan, Bakugo. Bakugo sneered at her before pushing past her shoulder. I'm going to defeat All Might. That's the plan. You must not want to go to this summer camp, do you? I don't care. I have to beat him. I can't just let him. It almost sounded like a bomb went off in the distance, making both Ochako and Bakugo turn just in time to see a shockwave coming their way. Ochako's went wide as she froze just watching the shockwave. Get down. Bakugo grabbed her and tackled her to the ground. Ochako gasped and could only brace herself as the shockwave struck them and nearly sent them flying out of the entrance they had just walked through. She felt her body move with the shockwave and her helmet immediately went flying away from her and Bakugo alike, never to be seen again, only to be replaced when this nightmare was over. Then, the shockwave was over and left both Bakugo and Ochako slightly shaking. Who needs to worry about a city when you're the villain? All Might roared as he slowly and ominously floated to the ground with his quirk. Ochako scrambled to her feet, her knees shaking as she stared at All Might. Her body shook and she swallowed a lump in her throat. Bakugo had the opposite reaction. He shot to his feet in a rage as he snarled at All Might. His body was shaking, yes, but not in fear but in anger. Then, in his own ire, Bakugo lunged at All Might with no plan. Ochako waved the boy off suddenly. If he wanted to fail, then that's on him. She just took this as what it was, a good distraction for her. Ochako ran for the nearest alleyway and immediately started to slow down so she couldn't be heard. All Might would, undoubtedly, take note of her absence any minute now. The moment Bakugo was knocked unconscious, she would be next on All Might's list. Still, with her heart beating so hard and so loud that she almost couldn't hear anything else. So, it was a miracle that she heard the yelling at all. No, you're no better than me. You killed him just like I did. Bakugo roared so loudly that his voice echoed all around. Young Bakugo, this isn't about that. It is now. There was an explosion that caused several windows to blow out and its own mini shockwave. Ochako blinked, wondering if she was maybe hearing this wrong and that the shockwave messed up her hearing. Still, she couldn't help herself. She peeked out of the alleyway to watch the two of them. Bakugo's explosion didn't even sway All Might one way or another. The absolute brick house of a man stood strong, but he looked different, and it took Ochako a moment to realize that All Might was frowning, and that's why he looked off. I just. All Might seemed at a loss for words. This isn't the time or place for this. All Might snatched Bakugo by the wrist and lifted him high in the air. Bakugo snarled as kicked the air, desperately trying to kick All Might with all of his strength. Bakugo, per usual, wasn't listening as his anger showed clear as day. No, it is the time or place. It's the time and place where I put you in the ground. Bakugo shot his free hand out and an explosion shot off right in All Might's face. The only thing that moved on All Might was his hair that lightly moved back from the explosion, like it was nothing more than a breeze. All Might, clearly still playing his role as a villain, but not wanting to give Bakugo the satisfaction of an answer, or just not wanting to broach the subject. All Might threw Bakugo into the air before punching him into a nearby building. Bakugo crashed through and Ochako quickly slinked back into the alleyway and took off running before All Might could spot her. Young Uraraka. All Might's booming voice echoed all around her as he started to scope around for her. Ochako kept her head down and was quietly slinking along the compact alleyway. She knew what she wanted to do. Ochako wanted to find the exit and leave Bakugo to his own demise. But she couldn't get what he was saying out of her head. You're no better than me. You killed him just like I did. It didn't take a genius for Ochako to realize that Bakugo was referring to that boy that he drove to suicide. It made anger coil deep inside of her. How dare he try and say All Might drove a boy to suicide? All Might is the best hero in all of Japan, but Ochako would be lying if she said she wasn't curious. Her mind went back to her childhood, back to someone she thought she had forgotten. No, don't think about them now. She shook her head and then knew she had to make up her mind. Did she want to flee and leave Bakugo to the wolves? Or should she help him? Ochako rolled her eyes. This boy better thank me. She hissed quietly and went to the nearest exit of the alleyway, and she peered out at the street. All Might was running in the opposite way, still looking for her. Ochako silently ran towards the building where Bakugo was thrown into. The building itself had a large hole in it where Bakugo had impacted. Ochako ducked inside. Bakugo was on the ground, and it looked like he was just waking up after being unconscious. They locked eyes and Bakugo got up. I'm not done. Why did you say that? She stepped in front of him in a whispering voice. Why say that All Might killed that boy, same as you? It doesn't involve you. Again, it does. She got right into his face. This is All Might we're talking about here. Ochako continued to whisper. Bakugo sighed and pinched the area between his eyes. You wouldn't understand. Bakugo finally hissed at her in rage. This is between me and him, and I would prefer it if you stay out of it. Well, I can't do that. She snapped back and poked him in the chest. As much as I would like to, I can't. I'm willing to help you, but I need to know why. Why am I sticking my neck out for someone who doesn't deserve to be here? For someone who's just like the bullies I grew up seeing. The bullies I knew that once beat her breath hitched, who beat my friend to death. My friend didn't have a quirk. Bakugo looked at her, his eyes leveled with her. Ochako would normally be crying just thinking about that friend Yuko. He was only 6 when a bunch of no-good middle schoolers found him. Someone in their school told their brother, who was one of those middle schoolers, and they... No, don't think about him. But she was too frustrated to cry about Yuko. She just wanted to end this nightmare and walk out of here with a passing grade. Bakugo threw his hands up before turning from her and putting his hands on the wall in front of her. I can't tell you everything. Bakugo whispered. It was clear he lost all fight for just this moment. But I have reasons to believe that All Might was the last person to speak to Izuku when Izuku was alive. I also believe that it wasn't just me that drove him over the edge of the building that day, if you get my drift. Ochako wanted to scoff. Please, it's All Might. He's the best hero. I don't want to fight about this. If you're just going to fight me on what I know is a fact, then leave. I'll deal with All Might on my own. Bakugo growled deeply and lowly. He didn't even look at her as he said this. If I could take back what I said that day, I would. He smacked the wall suddenly with his fist. Do you fuckers think I like walking with the knowledge that my words drove someone who was once my friend to suicide? He was my friend, and I treated him like dirt. He was my friend and he's gone. And upon learning that it wasn't just me that day, Bakugo breathed in and out heavily, and Ochako noticed that he was ... Bakugo was crying. I see you guys turn your noses up at me. I hear the whispers you say behind your hands. I even watched my auntie Izuku's mother get hospitalized because she misses her son that much, and you know what? I deserve it. I deserve it. I don't deny that, but that being said, I can at least try to atone for what I did. I deserve that much, don't I? He finally turned to look at her. And you think the way to do that is beating All Might? Maybe, maybe not. I have to do this, he told her uneasily. I have to do it for him. The real Izuku, who's probably watching us. Ochako sighed and looked at the ceiling. She hated her compassion sometimes. Though, it didn't mean she believed Bakugo. She had questions. But ... if he's trying to be better, then ... she'd help him. Okay, we can try, but we need a plan. We can't run in blind, and you need my help. If you want to keep up the lone macho crap, then I'll leave you to it, but know that you'll lose. Bakugo looked at her for a long moment before he nodded. Okay, let's do this before we run out of time. I couldn't have said it better. For Izuku, he got bored being with the teachers, and since Hitoshi passed, he was allowed to be with his friend again. Izuku bounded over to where the rest of the students were. Kuda saw him first as everyone was watching the screens with rapt interest. Bakugo and Ochako are fighting All Might. Kuda whispered as he held Izuku in his arms. He then held Izuku so Izuku was facing out and watching the screen with everyone else. Kuda made sure Izuku had support as he held him gently. Nothing seemed to be happening as the cameras were all focused on All Might. All Might was destroying the city. Nothing but rubble and broken buildings in his wake after one powerful punch. Izuku felt his ears go back. How are children supposed to compete with that? Izuku wondered as he watched the destruction. There was no sound, and maybe that was a good thing. It would be too overwhelming with how loud his destruction clearly was. The clock was ticking down. Bakugo and Ochako had less than 10 minutes to either fight All Might or get out of there. Well, in a shocking turn of events, it seemed both of them were down to fight. Bakugo came out of hiding into the end of the street. Even though he couldn't be heard, Izuku just knew that Bakugo was yelling for All Might. All Might turned to face him, and Bakugo didn't give him a chance to speak and rushed at the hero. This kid really thinks he can beat him? Ha, Zero asked with a headshake. He's going to lose. Itoshi hummed as he watched with a calculated gaze. I dunno, I think he can do it. Itoshi whispered as he continued to watch. As long as he works with Ochako, that is. Please, that guy doesn't like to work with anybody. Besides, you saw how they were fighting earlier. Kaminari crossed his arms. Right, Monoma. Monoma was watching Hitoshi with the same gaze Izuku was. I dunno, He muttered the same as Hitoshi. Let's watch before we make hasty decisions. They would. Everyone was quiet as they watched with undivided interest. Bakugo rushed at All Might, shocker there, and tried to surprise the man by throwing grenades at him. All Might threw his arm up and Izuku figured he was just going to try and block his face from getting hit. But no, All Might wasn't falling for Bakugo's obvious trap. Instead, All Might threw his fist up and created a gust of wind and another shockwave, ensnaring Bakugo and sending Bakugo flying through a building. However, Bakugo wasn't going to take that lying down as he got right back up and rushed for All Might again. He was yelling, his mouth moving a mile a minute, his face twisted in rage as he shot his hand out and went to pull the pin on his massive gauntlet. However, in the blink of an eye, All Might was suddenly directly in front of Bakugo, and with absolutely no mercy, All Might gut punched Bakugo so hard and so viciously that Bakugo soared through the air. Everyone winced and several people, Hitoshi included, let out soft ohs as they watched this happen. When Bakugo landed, he proceeded to vomit up his breakfast just to prove that he wasn't punched lightly. Izuku had to look away for a moment. Jesus, he shook his head. Still, Izuku could only give Bakugo credit. He got up. He was yelling again, and whatever he was saying was making All Might start to frown. Then, Bakugo was at it again. This time he pulled his pin and made a massive explosion, one that could rival All Might's smash attack. All Might was stunned. Run away, Izuku thought. You can't beat him. Run away, Bakugo. Izuku was unaware that he had used the mind link, but Hitoshi was not. Hitoshi looked at Izuku out of the corner of his eye before focusing back on the screen. Bakugo did not run away. No, he charged again for All Might. He used his quirk to propel himself forward off of the ground. All Might was able to prepare himself just in the nick of time, and the two of them collided, and it ended with All Might taking Bakugo's arm in one hand and placing his other hand firmly on Bakugo's back. Everyone recoiled when All Might put so much pressure behind his next move. All Might shoved Bakugo into the ground so hard that the asphalt split. All Might still had Bakugo's arm in his hand, and he pulled back on when he pushed Bakugo into the ground. Oh my god, he broke his arm. Sue looked away. Izuku could see it. If it wasn't broken, then it was dislocated as it looked, to Izuku at least. That Bakugo's shoulder popped out. It could be both. Holy shit. Kaminari also looked away. That's kinda messed up. Villains won't treat us kindly. He's only doing what he's told and going all out. Ida defended All Might. I don't disagree with you. Hitoshi looked at Ida before looking back at the screen. That being said, there's a difference between going all out and going too far. Villain training or not. All Might is a teacher. The class seemed split on this as they all broke off in soft mumbles. Bakugo still tried to fight against All Might by kicking, but it was futile. It seemed like it was the end of the line for Bakugo with no Ochako in sight. Something fell directly on All Might's head. It was some rubble large enough to knock All Might back in a stun attack. Then, as he tried to get his bearings, another piece of rubble fell on his head, stunning him again. It was then a shower of rubble. Piece after piece of broken homes and businesses in this fake city fell around All Might, some hitting him, some missing him. It didn't stop until he was completely encased in easily a ton of rubble. Ochako dropped from the rooftop she's been hiding in and ran to Bakugo. She hoisted him to his feet, but he looked uneasy as he swayed. Go, Izuku cried in his mind and out loud. The rubble was starting to move. Go, go, Hitoshi yelled just the same. Get out of there. Hurry, it's your last chance. Wait, no, they were running for the rubble. What are you two doing? It was a commotion as everyone yelled out as both Ochako and Bakugo ran back for All Might. Ochako had both of her hands out in front of her while Bakugo had the teacher catching cuffs in front of him. It's fruitless. Izuku let out a yowl. Bakugo, don't do this. Kauta was gentle as he patted Izuku's head. Hitoshi was next to yell. Turn around. Takoyami, who was standing next to Hitoshi, nodded in agreement. But of course neither Bakugo nor Ochako heard. Ochako used her quirk on all of the rubble and quickly sent all of it flying upwards, which Bakugo would shoot down with his other gauntlet, making the rubble into nothing but rocks that would rain down around them. And while he did that, Ochako would touch All Might with all 10 of her fingers. Bakugo then rushed in and handcuffed one of All Might's wrists, but not the other. All Might flew through the air before he could react. While in the air, he cocked his arm back, smash. He would clearly yell, but neither could hear it. They watched as Ochako, who was directly under him, took the brunt end of his attack. She wouldn't just go flying, but Izuku was sure he saw one of her legs snap. Sue and Mina both screamed in horror as it was clear they saw it as well. Hitoshi gasped out and flinched away, grabbing Takoyami's hand tightly and hiding his face into his friend's shoulder. All Might was floating higher and Bakugo went forward, but he stopped. He turned towards Ochako. Ochako was still okay, but she was screaming while holding onto her broken leg. I'm going to be sick. Momo turned away with her hand over her mouth. Gyro gently patted her back while also looking sickly. Why? Ochako's bone was sticking out. Everyone was horrified. Hitoshi hadn't even looked up from Takoyami's shoulder. Bakugo was seething. He was yelling at All Might, but again, nothing could be heard. However, Bakugo then did something surprising. He turned and rushed to Ochako. Bakugo had a dead arm, but that didn't stop him from using his good arm to try and help her the best he could, but there was only so much he could do with that one arm. Bakugo Katsuki and Ochako Uraraka have won against All Might. Nedzu's hurried voice yelled through the microphone. They won, a few kids asked. They didn't meet the requirements. Yeah, they cuffed All Might, but only one of his wrists unless. Did that count? Or were a couple of teachers feeling bad and wanting to get this torture over with? Izuku didn't know. What he did know was that the cameras were abruptly shut off and they weren't allowed to see anymore. What are you thinking? Izuku asked Hitoshi with the mind link. Hitoshi looked at Izuku before shaking his head. I think someone is going to lose either his job or his life. Because you didn't see it. Oboro was the one to come in. I at least saw his cloud. Not only that, but who wants to bet Aizawa is with him? Hitoshi was close to right. Oboro was faster than the medical bots as he landed down on the ground and rushed towards the children. He had Recovery Girl and Aizawa with him. The screams Ochako was emitting were bone-chilling and made him rush to her immediately while Aizawa activated his quirk to bring Tashinori down. Oboro was gentle as he pushed Bakugo out of his way. The break was bad. Her bone was jutting out in a sharp, jagged piece that pierced through the skin and her costume as a whole. Tell me what you need me to do, Bakugo demanded, and Oboro swallowed hard but didn't have to speak because Recovery Girl did. You just hold her hand, young man. Let us take care of the rest, she demanded in a firm, but not unkind, tone. As a hero, it was required for them, Aizawa, Oboro, and All Might, take emergency first aid should a time call for it, and this was one of those times. He told Bakugo. In short, I need to push the bone back, and Oboro started softly as he and Recovery Girl helped lay Ochako's legs flat. No, don't touch it, Ochako wailed loudly and frantically. I know it hurts, sweetie, but the bone has to go back in. Bakugo, just let her hold your hand, leave the rest to me. Shouta. Oboro shouted for his husband, who, Bakugo realized, was trying to throttle All Might by strangling the man with his scarf. Mr. Aizawa looked pissed, his lips pulled back into a snarl, hair raised, and eyes red. When he turned to look at them, he looked like a feral animal ready to strike. Leave him alone. I need you. Urgh. Aizawa pulled his scarf off of All Might. You got fucking lucky. Before he ran to aid them. Put her head in your lap and activate your quirk. Don't take your eyes off of her. Bakugo, hold her hand. Ochako, I know this is going to hurt, okay, but know that you're safe. Ochako covered her eyes with her arm as she let out several loud and scared sobs. Bakugo scrambled to grab her hands as Aizawa put her head in his lap as instructed. Bakugo couldn't even look as Oboro ripped the leg of her costume. He used the fabric to make a tourniquet just above the break. Ochako's head threw back as she let out a scream that would echo all around them. Bakugo felt strangely numb as he watched this happen. Did Deku's legs snap like that when he? Recovery Girl nodded at Oboro. You need to do it soon before the girl bleeds out. I know. The hard part was coming as Oboro prepared himself for this next part. He swallowed hard and pushed the bone back into her leg. Bakugo felt he was going to be sick just from the noise alone as Recovery instructed Oboro on what to do. Bakugo held strong. Was Izuku in pain like Ochako in his final moments? Was all he could think. It was weird for him to think of these things, but he was. Ochako let out another scream of pain as she tried to writhe and flinch away from Oboro. Recovery Girl and Aizawa helped keep her still. Tears were flowing out of her eyes as she wailed and cried in pain. Recovery Girl was finally able to kiss Ochako, and this kiss is what did it. Ochako fainted. Her stamina drained as her body started to heal. I can't heal her fully, but it's more than enough for the time being. Go and take her to the infirmary. Recovery Girl told the bot, and the bot would do just that. How badly are you hurt? Oboro asked Bakugo as he inspected the boy. I am fine. Oboro just touched the shoulder that popped out of its socket and it nearly sent Bakugo to his knee. Probably dislocated. Oboro muttered as he inspected it. I can pop it back in. Bakugo growled and took a step away from Oboro. He then covered his shoulder with his other hand as he stared at the man. He may as well repeat what Ochako had screamed, don't touch it. He knew it must have been written on his face because Oboro put his hands up. Bakugo. Aizawa was firm as he grabbed Bakugo's hand. You can't get healed if your shoulder is out of your socket. It needs to be popped back in. Bakugo sucked in several breaths as he felt himself shake again. I didn't mean for her to break her leg, he whispered, which was strange because what he was going to say was, I can do it myself, or I don't need you looking down on me. But that's not what he said. We know you didn't, son. Oboro coaxed Bakugo by grabbing his hand gently. Someone doesn't understand the concept of holding back, and that's not your fault. Oboro reassured him. I am sorry. He croaked suddenly, which made both Oboro and Aizawa look at him. Bakugo felt. Was he crying? No, he was Bakugo Katsuki. And Bakugo Katsuki doesn't fucking cry. Yet, he pulled his fingers back from his face and he saw tears. You drove him off that building. Bakugo yelled in his fury as All Might grabbed him, right before All Might would dislocate his arm and smash him into the pavement, a move that Bakugo would later discover broke 4 of his ribs. No more than you have. All Might yelled right back in his growing frustration with Bakugo, and then he would slam Bakugo into the pavement and dislocate his arm. No more than you have. All Might repeated after he finished, now out of breath and almost wheezing. And like with me, he will never forgive you, and you're going to have to live with that. Bakugo clenched his fist in rage. No, you're wrong. There's one thing that I can do that you obviously haven't. Bakugo then turned. Bakugo. The teachers tried to call him back, but he wasn't listening. He was a man on a mission as he took off running. Yes, his arm was dislocated and 4 of his ribs broken, but that didn't matter. Bakugo stormed through the entrance of Ground Beta and up to where the other students were. He was going to make this right even if it was the last thing he did, because ... he can't keep living like this. He wants to talk about atonement then. He should have done this from the moment he learned the truth. Nobody in Wano expected Bakugo to slam those doors open. It made them all jump. Bakugo. Hitoshi was, surprisingly, the first to greet him. What are you doing? You're still injured. Anyone with eyes could see that. Several of his classmates looked concerned as he let his eyes scan over all of them. Then his eyes finally landed on Moss, who was being held by Kauta. Put him down, Bakugo demanded as he walked up to Kauta. Bakugo's breath was ragged and he must have looked crazed. Kauta actually tightened his hold on Moss as he took a step away from Bakugo. Just put him down. Bakugo, calm down, Hitoshi demanded as he put himself between Kauta, Moss, and Bakugo. What? Hitoshi's eyes suddenly lit up, literally they lit up purple as he turned to look at Moss and Kuta. Kuta ... put him down. Hitoshi switched sides like that. Kuta looked unsure, but Moss mewed, and whatever he said Kuta understood. Kuta hesitated, but he would eventually comply. He placed Moss down and Hitoshi got out of the way. Soon, Moss, or rather Izuku, and Bakugo were staring at one another. When all was said and done, Bakugo would blame internal bleeding from his broken ribs for this next move. As the class was watching, all confused except for the only other person in the room who knew this secret and the 2 concerned teachers watching from the hallway, nobody knew why Bakugo did this next. Bakugo dropped to the ground. All the way, his entire body was on the ground in a bow so low it just looked like he collapsed. His nose was against the carpet as he spoke. I'm sorry. Please. He let out several deep breaths. Forgive me. Then, Izuku would put his paw on Bakugo's head. His paw was gentle and maybe this was the internal bleeding talking, but it felt almost like a hand nestling in his hair. When Bakugo would look up, he saw those familiar green eyes staring right back into his soul. Izuku would meow and then take his paw back. He jumped away and clambered up Hitoshi's shoulder. For just a moment, both Hitoshi's and Izuku's eyes started to glow purple and green respectively. Come on, Hitoshi leaned down and offered his hand to Bakugo. It's filthy down there, buddy, and I think you really need to see recovery girl if you're begging for forgiveness from my cat. Hitoshi was playing it off for the rest of the class as he helped Bakugo up. Hitoshi then helped dust Bakugo off. Being gentle as he did so, he pulled Bakugo in and whispered so lowly that only Bakugo could hear him. You're forgiven. Don't muck it up. Izuku ran his tail under Hitoshi's chin as he watched Bakugo. His eyes were absolutely gleaming before he turned away and went on about his business. And it was like a weight was lifted off of Bakugo's shoulders. Or that might actually be the internal bleeding, as Bakugo would pass out shortly after that. Not everyone passed the exams. Mina and Denki lost against Nezu, which, holy crap, how were they supposed to win? Hitoshi wasn't sure if he could win against Nezu and a crane. Regardless, they lost. Kirishima and Sado also lost against Semitas as they both wore themselves out trying to fight against all of his walls. The last pair to lose was Siro and Ajiro up against Midnight, who knocked them both out almost immediately. Now finals are over and neither Bakugo nor Ochako have come back after their fight with All Might. Mina was openly weeping as she held on to Kirishima, who looked upset, as everyone else who lost looked disappointed in themselves. You guys have fun at the camp, Nina cried as Kirishima patted against her hair to try and calm her down. Aizawa opened the door and walked in with his hands in his pockets. Good news, Ochako and Bakugo are going to be alright. Both will be in a cast, but they'll be okay, he told them, and several people let out soft sighs. Though, for the first time since losing, Kaminari cracked a teary smile. Bakugo must have really hit his head. You missed it, Mr. Aizawa. He begged forgiveness from Moss. Kaminari wiped his eyes. Pretty funny. I'll probably tease him about it next semester. Mr. Aizawa's face split into a grin. I'm sure you have plenty of time to tease him about it in the camp. But, Mina and I lost. It was a logical ruse. Aizawa beamed a very unnatural smile to everyone. Seeing how every one of you passed the written exams with flying colors, everyone is going to the camp. However, those that failed against their teachers will be taking remedial classes while everyone else gets to do fun activities. There was an immediate outcry from several students, and Ida even hopped up, his hand still raised in the air as he spoke loudly and with his full chest. Aren't you worried that all of these logical ruses are going to ruin our trust in you as our teacher? Not at all. Aizawa's weird smile dropped as he still looked amused at Ida's question. It's up to me to keep you guys prepared for the real world, and once out there you'll face worse surprises than what I dish out. Aizawa told them all before turning and walking back to the door. You're all allowed to go back to the dorms once you're out of your costumes, and of course once you put your costumes back. Still, good job everyone. Make sure you have everything needed for camp in 2 weeks' time. Then he waved them goodbye. Once the door shut, Shouta scowled. Now, to yell at a buffoon. Yagi Toshinori was not having a good day. It started out fine, sure, but then he went and messed it all up again, and he had the welts on the back of his legs to sew for it as Recovery Girl gave him a good whacking with her cane. It didn't matter how quickly he tried to get away. Once he was in her sights, she became snipe and continued her beating. That girl could have bled out. Toshinori, you need to learn when to hold back. She's just a child. Recovery Girl didn't want to hear it as she continued to whack him with her cane. I was playing the role I was given. Villains wouldn't hold back against children, and not only that, but Toshinori was ashamed to admit it, but maybe he let his temper get to him. With everything that's happened and the fact that he still has yet to find a successor for One for All, on top of Bakugo's ire and insistence that Toshinori practically pushed Midoriya off the building, it all became a little too much for just one man. Of course he felt guilty. He hadn't even meant for young Ochako to take the brunt of such an attack, but now here he was. The doors opened, showing Shouta and Nezu, with Nezu riding on Shouta's shoulder. They were having this conversation out in the hallway of the infirmary so as not to disturb the children resting. Shouta's glare made Toshinori shrink in on himself a little. How are they? Shouta ignored All Might entirely. Well, thanks to Amuro and you, of course, I was able to heal her leg. The downside is that because of the way it broke, it's going to take multiple heals before she can walk on it properly. However, it could have been worse. Much worse, Shouta agreed. Something green caught all of their eyes, and everyone immediately stopped talking when Moss just came strutting through the hallways. Everyone just watched. The cat padded along the floor, looked at them, and kept walking. He got to the infirmary door and stared at it for several long seconds before he realized his problem. Spicy, Shouta spoke, making the cat look at him. We're kind of in the middle of... Moss bumped his head against the door and then looked firmly at Shouta. Shouta sighed and walked over. He opened the door for Moss. Moss happily padded in and Shouta shut the door. He would then return to the group. Regardless, he continued where he left off. You got lucky, Toshinori. If that girl would have bled out or lost her leg... well, I wouldn't have to say it, would I? Aizawa asked with a girl, and it made Toshinori gulp. I will apologize to Ochako and Bakugo when they wake. I swear it to you. I want you away from Bakugo. Aizawa put his foot down immediately. I'm no idiot, Toshinori. He's pissed because he knows what happened that day. He needs to simmer down, and until then I don't want you around him. And once he's calm enough, I'll personally monitor a one-on-one between the two of you. There was a heartbeat of silence before Toshinori just backed off. That would probably be for the best. He agreed without a fight. Nezu chittered his teeth a little. Now on to more uncomfortable topics. Toshinori, bumps, scrapes, and bruises are one thing, and are expected of the hero course as a whole. Broken limbs and ribs are a whole other thing entirely. Nezu started to lecture Toshinori. Regardless of the dorms, the parents are still expecting their children to be safe. I know. Toshinori sighed heavily and rubbed at his face. I don't know. I don't have an excuse. However, I want to counter-argue with you for a moment. You could have easily crushed Kaminari and Mina with that crane. Of course, Nezu was smiling as he said this. However, here's the difference between you and I, Toshinori. Everything I did was planned to a T. I had certain exits I would block off with the crane and the rubble. Not only that, but I always made sure the children weren't anywhere near the crane head as I operated. Was it fun? Oh yes, it was watching them scramble around in that panicked state of theirs. Nezu started to shake with excitement before he corrected himself with a cough. In short, I knew they would panic and not go the right way, and I was right. I never intended to harm them. If I did, then all I had to do was just throw rubble and debris on top of them at the start, which I didn't. The goal today was to test our students and their limits. If they fail, they fail, and if they pass, they pass. That's the point of being a teacher. Toshinori frowned at this. I see. I guess I need to do some more research on teaching. Oh, you'll have plenty of time to do that. Aizawa growled, and Nezu put a paw up to stop him before he spoke any further. Please, Shouta, let me. I'm the principal. You see, Toshinori, I can't fire you. The HPSC would have my tail if I did. So, it's been decided amongst all the other teachers that you just aren't ready for teaching just yet. But this test run has been an experience. So, instead you're now Aburo's teacher assistant. Congrats. This way you're still at UA, you still get the salary, and you get teaching experience all rolled into one. We should have done this from the start, Shouta mumbled. Foundational Hero Studies was originally his class to start with. Toshinori rubbed at the back of his neck as he stared at the ground. All right, that's more than fair. I'm glad you see so. Nedzu was smiling. Because if you didn't, then we'd have a problem. But since you agreed so willingly, then there's no problem at all. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at those students, yeah? Nedzu asked Toshinori. Perhaps you should go back to your apartment and rest up. You look a bit peaked and should get some rest. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a demand disguised as such, and Toshinori just nodded in compliance. Yeah, I'm rather tired. Toshinori whispered the last part. I have some things to think about. He would then turn and leave the area. When he was gone, Shouta snorted. I still feel like he got let off too easy. I know, Shouta, but as much as we wish for wrongdoings to be punished, the HPSC just wouldn't understand. I think a demotion is just what he needs. Besides, Oboro is as good a teacher as any to get Toshinori to understand how things should and shouldn't go, Nedzu explained while opening the door to the infirmary. Recovery Girl gave a soft noise at what she saw first. Oh, I see now. Ochako had her leg up in the air and was laying on her back as she rested. There, laying directly on her stomach, was Moss, the emotional support cat, doing his job well as Ochako was awake and petting him. Though it was clear that she had been crying by the tear stains on her cheek that were dry. Ochako turned to look at the teachers and principal. Hello, she greeted them while trying to play it cool. I must have really passed out. The sun is almost down. She pointed at the window at the orange sky. How are you feeling, Ms. Uraraka? Nedzu inquired. Ochako's mouth twisted a little and she picked Moss up to hold him against her chest. Moss didn't seem to mind as he just let this happen. Okay, I guess. I should really apologize to Mr. Shirakumo. She spoke almost like she was on autopilot as she stared out the window. Why? Shouta inquired. You didn't do anything. I was screaming at him. I should have. I'm better than that. She told them while looking at Moss and then holding him in the air so he was facing her. Moss pressed his paw pad against her nose and she smiled at him. Uraraka, your leg had the bone sticking out of it and you were bleeding badly. It was a femur break. You had every right to scream and cry at that moment, Shouta told her as he squatted down by her bedside. He then reached and scratched Moss behind the ear. Ochako looked outside again. Did we pass, at least? She asked him. Shouta smiled. With flying colors. Ochako had to walk on crutches for a while. Recovery Girl told her she should be able to walk on her leg by the time camp rolls around. So, her leg was in a cast and she hopped along. Immediately several students wanted to sign her cast and did once she gave permission. Eda demanded that nobody sign anything inappropriate and to keep it PG. It was all rather peaceful in the dorms once finals were completely over and it made everyone relax. Bakugo, who had his arm in a sling, was getting ready to retreat for his bedroom for the night when Kirishima spoke. Hey bro. Kirishima called to Bakugo, making him pause. What? I'm busy. Bakugo grunted in his usual tone. Hitoshi was sitting on the couch, Moss in his lap as he and the others kept riding this high and were getting to watch a movie. It was put to a vote and then put to a poll and then finally they just drew from a hat. It was decided they were going to watch a Disney movie. The Little Mermaid to be exact. Not really Hitoshi's thing, but the others were so happy that he just couldn't say no. Takoyami and him were sitting side by side as they turned to Bakugo. We're all going to watch a movie. You want to join us? There it was. Finally, an olive branch extended to Bakugo after all these months since the USJ. Would he take it or reject it? There was a heavy silence between everyone as they waited. Bakugo snorted. Fuck it. I ain't got nothing better to do, I guess. And Bakugo turned towards the others. He wedged himself between Hitoshi and Denki with a sigh. I do wish it wasn't the Little Mermaid though. Trust me, you're not the only one, dude. Denki laughed. Just don't go begging the TV for forgiveness, right? Bakugo turned to Denki so fast that Hitoshi was surprised Bakugo's neck didn't break. Bakugo only let out steam through his nose like a bull and Kaminari got the hint. He clammed up fairly tightly after that as it looked like he was trying not to laugh. Gimme that goddamn cat. Hitoshi hardly had time to think when Bakugo scooped Izuku up with one hand. Izuku, who was sleeping, woke up and let out a mew of confusion. Bakugo turned Izuku so they were now facing each other. Bakugo raised a finger at Izuku and pointed at him sternly. I don't want you getting all smug and shit, you hear me? That was the blood loss. Moss just looked sleepy before he reached a paw out and taped Bakugo's nose. His eyes were soft and his body language lax. Then Izuku started to knead the air just above Bakugo's face and he started to purr. Oh, Mina cooed. He's making biscuits. Biscuits? Where? How? Shoto asked from his spot on the floor. I see no biscuits. No, sweetie. Mina shook her head hopelessly. It's a saying. Mossy is just kneading the air and it looks like he's kneading dough. She explained to him and Shoto just blinked. Oh, he hummed. Take your weird cat back. Bakugo dropped Moss back into Hitoshi's lap. Hitoshi stroked Moss along the spine and scratched just at the base of his tail. Moss purred at this and laid down happily. The lights were dimmed and the movie started. It wouldn't be halfway through the movie when Moss would switch laps. He laid happily in Bakugo's lap. "Pushing your damn luck," Bakugo muttered, but scratched Moss under the chin regardless. Only a few moments later Eri would pop on into the dorms. Hitoshi didn't even question it when she crawled into his lap like a lost kitten. He scooped her up and kept one hand on her back and one on her legs just to keep her steady. He figured she was just missing him and didn't feel the need to really think too much deeper than that. Eri would stay in his lap during the whole movie. Hitoshi was so engrossed in the movie that he didn't even see or notice when at one point when Takoyami looked at Eri. Eri pulled down under her eye and stuck her tongue out at Hitoshi's friend. The movie would end, as all movies do, and everyone was getting up to retreat for the night. Hitoshi gently patted Eri's legs to get her to get off of him. She didn't. Bakugo didn't move right away either, and Hitoshi noted that Moss was passed out on Bakugo's lap. "What are you doing, sweetie?" Hitoshi asked with a smile. Eri puffed her cheeks out. "I may ... or may not ... have done something bad." That got a few people chuckling as they hung around. Hitoshi smiled at her and moved some hair out of her face. "Okay, what did you do?" Eri looked away from him. "Promise you won't get mad." Hitoshi sighed deeply and just smiled. "Big brother won't get mad." "What did you do, sweetie?" "Well ... it's just..." Eri had her hands tucked away in her jacket that she was wearing. She kicked her legs as she tried to find the right words. "I just couldn't stand to see her so sad, so why?" Hitoshi's smile started to drop. "Eri, you couldn't stand to see who so sad?" And his eyes darted from Eri's face to her jacket. "What did you do?" "I didn't reverse her as far back as Pumpkin," and out of her jacket pocket Eri pulled out. "Oh dear God. You rewound Brat," he gasped as he took the kitten from her quickly. Brat let out a scraggly mew and immediately Izuku's ears twitched and he woke up. "She was sad. She couldn't walk and I didn't like seeing her sad and I've been practicing," and Eri's face turned red as tears perked in her eyes. "You said you wouldn't get mad," she yelled before she pouted by puffing her cheeks out. Brat let out another meow. She was like a half-printed cat. She was young, yes, but not a newborn. She was clearly of kitten age at 6 to 8 weeks. Her fur was lighter in color and would turn darker as she got older. Kaminari looked at the kitten. "Does that thing even qualify as a cat?" Moss hissed at Kaminari, which made the blonde flinch in surprise. Moss then jumped on Hitoshi's shoulder and leaned in. "What do you?" Moss then snatched Brat by the scruff and jumped down. "Hey, Moss, mine now," Izuku stated firmly as he walked away. "No, give her back." Then the doors opened. "Where is she?" came Aizawa's immediate demand. Eri ran into Hitoshi's legs in fear. Hitoshi wanted to laugh. He just had no other emotion but shock and laughter. Moss's getaway wasn't so easy with him trying to waddle away with Brat. A cloud swept Moss off of his paws as Oboro grabbed him. Moss let out a growl as he swatted claws hidden away at Oboro. "Thank you." Oboro still managed to retrieve Brat as he put Moss on the ground. To say Izuku was cursing in his mind was an understatement. "Eri." Shouta came around the couch as Eri was doing her best to merge with Hitoshi. "Now, we told you can't rewind Brat." He got down on one knee so they were face to face. "Why would you go behind our back and do it anyways?" Eri looked away from Shouta. "She was sad," she whispered. "At least I think she was," she admitted while still clinging to Hitoshi for dear life. "I just did what I thought was best for her," Eri finally admitted. Shouta sighed and rubbed at his tired face. "That's not for you to decide. You're too young to make choices like that. It's not your responsibility either. There's a reason we told you no, but come on. That's not a discussion for everyone to hear." Eri was then yoinked by Shouta grabbing her by under her arms and putting her on his hip. Hitoshi looked around for Moss and he could only laugh as Moss was now on Oboro's shoulder and staring at kitten Brat with rapt interest. Then, Moss would leave with Oboro without another word. Hitoshi sighed softly and just gave his head a shake. Things were going to be interesting for sure and he had a feeling that Moss wasn't going to be around for a while. Shouta sat in front of Tamura, plexiglass sitting firmly between the two of them. Not that Tamura could do anything to the man as he was bound with a straitjacket and on heavy quirk suppressants. "I'm trying to help you, Tamura. Whether or not you believe me." Tamura just stared at him. Shouta sat back in his chair as he sighed through his nose. "Tamura, I know you don't believe us because you've been brainwashed, but us heroes are willing to give you a second chance." More silence as Tamura just stared with glassy eyes, though his right eye was blackened from the construction hook that slammed into him. Shouta sighed softly and leaned his arms on his knees so he was a little closer to Tamura. "They left you behind, Tamura. You know that, I know you do." Tamura's face gave a little twitch and he finally spoke. "They'll get me out of here before you know it and then you all will pay." Shouta wasn't convinced. "I don't think so. I think that's what you like to believe, but that's not the case." Tamura's red eyes narrowed at Shouta. "As cool as you are, Eraser, you certainly aren't that smart. Father loves me and he'll do anything to get me back." Shouta hummed at that. You say that, but that's not what I see. I see someone who's being replaced by something that's not even a human." "That's not true. That's my brother you're talking about." Tamura growled and was jerking his hands, but they couldn't be moved because of the jacket. Shouta was sure that if Tamura could, he would scratching at his neck. No, that's the corpse of your brother. Tamura growled. Shut up, he hissed between clenched teeth. He doubt if I would have known. If I had been there that day, then he'd. You're talking about the day he jumped, right? Tamura's breathing picked up into sharp and panicked breaths. Father was devastated upon learning the news. I've never seen anything like it. I never even knew the twerp, and here father was. Upset. I never knew the kid, but I wanted to avenge him ... if that makes any sense. You wanted to avenge him because his death made all for one upset. Shouta nodding in understanding. But you have no connection with him. Tamura frowned. Father wanted me to be his big brother, and I would rather die than disobey father. Plus, it made him happy to see Izuku alive. Well, I use the term see lightly. My father can't see, not in a normal sense anyways. Tamura whispered the last part while looking away. I see. So, you took Izuku in as a brother despite knowing that he was anything but. Tamura turned away from Eraserhead. Then, the man shrugged. Maybe the brat and I would have gotten along when he was alive. Maybe we would have hated each other, but he's dead. Tamura huffed out softly. He looked almost torn as he said this. He's dead, he repeated as his eyebrows furrowed. The kid is dead and I've been playing big brother to Anamo. Now you get it. Shouta whispered to Tamura. Tamura, I don't think All for One cares for you. I really don't think he does. Lies. Tamura resisted. He took me in when the heroes shunned me. He cares for me. Tamura struggled against the restraints as he tried desperately to get to his neck. Tamura suddenly stopped as quickly as he started, and Shouta was stunned to see tears perk in the man's eyes. It was just so surreal to witness. Ever since Izuku woke up, it's always been about him, and I just blindly followed to keep father happy. Tamura whispered before he started laughing. That fucking cat. Tamura continued to laugh. It's all Izuku could talk about, and then he gets the idea to kidnap that kid. His friend. We told him time and time again that hero brat isn't his friend. That there's no Hitoshi in his memories, but he just wouldn't listen, and now look at me taken by heroes. And he's nowhere to be found. Neither father nor Kirigiri. Tamura swallowed hard at that revelation. Shouta looked him dead in the eyes and gave him that final push. All for One went from doting on you to doting on something that died over a year ago. Why? Because that thing looks like his real son. You were always the stepchild replacement, Tamura. He always wanted Izuku, but after his fight with All Might he couldn't take Izuku with him for whatever reason, and so ... he settled for you. But now he has his son back. And you. Shouta opened his hands and almost seemed to shrug. And there's one more thing. Your quirk. Tamura just looked at Shouta with wet eyes. My quirk, he whispered in a scared, small, and almost childish voice. I'm going to be blunt with you. We have firm reason to believe that your quirk isn't your quirk. We ran tests on you. Shouta pulled out papers from his scarf. Tests when we first captured you a week ago, and the same tests performed now. Tamura, your body wasn't made for that quirk you have. That's why you've been scratching at your neck. Shouta was calm as he said this and pushed both papers against the glass. Off suppressants, your body was slowly eating away at itself. Slowly decaying, if you will. The quirk was rotting you from the inside out. It shows in your blood cell count mostly, but the signs were also in your organs. The second test was performed last night while you were asleep. There was a major improvement since you were put on quirk suppressants. Your blood cell count is skyrocketing back up, and your organs aren't struggling as hard. Tamura, it's not a coincidence. The quirk he gave you is killing you, and he didn't care. He's using you, most likely for a successor. Tamura, you have the toe joint. You're supposed to be quirkless. Do you know who else grew up quirkless? We think that quirk was meant for Izuku. All for One probably knew how it was affecting your body and let you keep it. It was always about Izuku in the end. Tamura let out a squeak out of his throat before he started to thrash. You're wrong. You're wrong. Tamura let out wheezing sobs. It was all a setup. Tamura finally screamed as he cried. A loud sob racked his frame. He let me kill my own family. With no remorse. Tamura's sobbing suddenly ceased as he slowly looked at Shouta with incensed red eyes. He was shaking violently while gnashing his teeth. Then he said the line that Shouta wanted to hear. What do you need me to do? Small bonus. Because I haven't seen much of Dadmik in a while. Hizashi hummed to himself as he helped brush Hitoshi's hair. You have Obero's hair, somehow. Hizashi grumbled. Hair that defies all gravity. But if we were to straighten it. He then whipped out a hair straightener. Maybe we can work with it. Hitoshi sat still on his knees as he let Hizashi straighten his hair. It took a long time because Hitoshi's hair just didn't want to cooperate with Hizashi. But in the end he got it, and Hitoshi's hair was straight and it tickled the back of his neck. It just hardly went past his chin. Still it hung his eyes, and he had to move it back to look at himself properly. Hitoshi tilted his head at his reflection. Something about his straight hair and tired eyes just looked so familiar. Moss, who walked into the bathroom, let out a startled mew and jumped. I guess he didn't recognize you. Hizashi grinned. Hitoshi stared at Moss, who looked at him with wide eyes. What? The answer he got he didn't expect. You look like my uncle. Then Moss turned and stalked out. Tilt. Asashi tilted Hitoshi's head up and helped apply some lipstick. I think this color will fit you well. It's a light pink. Asashi was speaking, but Hitoshi was hardly listening. You look like my uncle. That was unsettling. Not that it mattered, as mere seconds later Hitoshi's hair would literally poof back up into its troll doll style. Asashi was devastated, but Hitoshi was relieved. Maybe long hair wasn't meant for him. Dabai grunted as the old lady kissed his cheek. This was roughly the 4th kiss he received this week. He wasn't too sure, as each kiss usually knocks him out flat. Although this last kiss didn't knock him out just yet, it did drain his energy to the point of feeling tired and irritable. Then again, when wasn't Dabai irritable? Well, Recovery Girl started as she tilted Dabai's head to focus on her. He just stared and she hummed, looking better. I'm just glad to see those stitches removed. She pointed her thumb at the boatload of bloodied staples. The skin won't ever be perfect again, but you certainly look a lot better in my eyes. She touched the raised pink skin with her soft and wrinkly fingers. The skin itself was where he once had those staples put in. The area was scared and raised. Really, that was the worst of it. Those areas under his eyes and around his mouth were going to scar, but the rest of his skin was still able to be saved. The area became lighter and bouncy again. Obviously, those weren't the only areas to scar. He had lots of staples in lots of places. Still, Dabai had to admit, he'd never thought he'd see somewhat normal skin on himself again. How many more appointments do you think I need? He asked her as he touched the tender skin. 2, 3, it's unsure. That being said, you need to go easy on your fire, as you'll accidentally burn your skin from the inside again. Well, you'd be happy to know my quirk privileges have been revoked. Dabai grumbled a bit. He knew it was only a safety precaution on the rat's part. Still, Dabai was forced to take medical quirk suppressants, and no, he couldn't just not take them. Nedzu, or sometimes Aizawa, would watch and make sure he swallowed the pills down. He couldn't leave UA either, as Nedzu chipped Dabai, and twice if they attempted to leave without permission the teachers would be noted and they would both be hauled back to jail. Nedzu meant it when he said he put in precautions to stop them from either taking off or harming the students. For now, dear, earn your stripes around here and I'm sure Nedzu will take you off of the suppressants. Recovery Girl told him as she sat in her chair and went to type on her computer with surprisingly deft fingers. Dabai could only hum at that and he leaned back on his elbows. Well, I should go. Make sure Toga has everything she needs. Of course, if you need me you know where to find me. Right in. Thanks. And he took off ready to start his day off, wondering if today would be the day he would get to see Shoto again or not. Shinsu. Hitoshi blinked as he turned to look at Shoto, who was standing at his dorm door after knocking. "To-do, you know you can call me Hitoshi," Hitoshi told him with a smile. Hitoshi felt a little embarrassed as he didn't think anyone would bug him today, and now here he was, with his face caked in heavy contour makeup, with dark purple glittery eyeshadow on and deep black lipstick coating his lips. It didn't seem that Shoto minded Hitoshi's face full of makeup, as he looked like he had a lot on his mind. Shoto just stared at him and it looked like he was turning it over in his head. Then he just shook his head. "Can we talk?" "Sure." Hitoshi moved to the side to allow Shoto in and Shoto walked in. "What's up?" Hitoshi asked as he shut the door and then went to sit on his bed, where Moss was happily sleeping with baby Brat laying with him. Hitoshi didn't know how Moss keeps kidnapping Brat from the Fosters, and apparently, neither do the Fosters. Regardless, Hitoshi sat gently so as not to wake the cats. Shoto looked at Hitoshi and then looked down at his slipper-clad feet. When your uncle's misdeeds came to light. When everything you thought you wanted was suddenly, and surprisingly, in motion. How'd you feel? Talk about heavy. Hitoshi leaned back on his hands as he thought about Shoto's question. "Well, at first, I was terrified," Hitoshi whispered. "When the Fosters learned what he'd done to me, I swear they made bets on who would throw the first punch. Still, I was certain he was going to hunt me down. Talk to my Fosters in that voice he'd used to get people to see that he's not a bad man, just a tired man with a problem child to raise." Hitoshi sighed and then laid on his bed so his legs were dangling off. "The Fosters would laugh with him and return me, scold me, and then leave me like everyone else." Hitoshi's eyebrows furrowed as he thought about it. After a silence, Shoto softly asked what happened. "He got away." Hitoshi laughed. "It's believed the night I managed to run away he just up and dipped. Then, I realized it's real. Oh my god, it's actually happening. He's going to finally get what's coming to him. And every day I waited to hear that he'd been arrested. But he was never caught. Last I saw him while you were there." Hitoshi then looked at Shoto. "He shot me. And still he has yet to be caught and put to justice. It just shows how slippery a man truly is." Shoto frowned before he sat next to Hitoshi on Hitoshi's bed. Hitoshi looked at him. "So, what's with the question?" "My father is finally being charged with child abuse, neglect and with domestic abuse," Shoto told Hitoshi. "Oh wow, that must be exciting." Shoto frowned at this and gently tugged at a string on his shirt. Yes, no, I don't know how I should feel. On one hand, he's finally getting what's coming to him. Finally, but on the other hand, what if it doesn't happen? Like with you and your uncle. What if it's just a waste of time and resources and for nothing? My old man has a lot of money, Hitoshi. He can pay off anyone and everyone. I see. Hitoshi looked at his ceiling. You're in the stage I was in. The stage where you think they're just going to scold you and give you back to your abuser. It happened in the past. Why would this time be any different? Shoto put both of his hands under his head as he stared at the ceiling with Hitoshi. Because it was different for me. Hitoshi turned to look at Shoto and Shoto turned his head to look at him in turn. It was finally different. I wasn't scolded for lying, nor was I handed back to my uncle. So this time has to be different for you. You know why? Why? Because you're not the one who filed the complaint. Hitoshi told him and then looked back at his ceiling. And they're all forced to listen now. Huh, Shoto whispered. That's a little messed up if you think about it. Yeah, I know. Hitoshi whispered as he then laughed. Trust me, I know. Come on. Hitoshi patted Shoto's leg before standing up. Huh, where? We're gonna go and get some ice cream downstairs. I think we both need it. When we're done, Shoto trailed off, making Hitoshi look at him. Could you put makeup on me? You want to wear makeup? Shoto thought about it before nodding. Yeah, I think I do. UA was a school with a no-nonsense policy on bullying. This much was clear to anyone who attended. So, when a new quirkless girl was suddenly added to the Gen Ed roster while nobody dared bully her, it was clear that a lot of the Gen Ed students didn't exactly welcome her with open arms. It was shown when eating lunch. She was by herself. It was almost comical if it wasn't sad. One giant table with one lonely girl sitting at it. Still, she looked unbothered as she ate her lunch and kicked her feet. Now, there was a little under a week left before school would be let out for summer. After this week it would be time for camp come Monday. While everyone was already planning on a mall trip this Saturday to get things they may need for camp, not everyone could come. Still, the fact that the semester was about to end didn't stop Ochako from standing up from her table with and approaching the lonely girl. Ochako spoke briefly to her and then gestured her thumb towards her table with Ida. The invitation was clear. The girl didn't even hesitate as she perked and quickly went to join Ochako and Ida. That one notion led to their, somehow, second, third, and fourth unofficial members of Class 1A. Toga Himiko and her two very weird brothers Dabai and Jin, which was strange because Hitoshi knew for a fact that Jin was a grown-ass adult and was like 90% sure Dabai was one as well. It was hard to say as Dabai kept the lower half of his face hidden by a face mask. Jin on the other hand wore a full-fledged face mask when he spoke and he absolutely had some form of DID. Toga brought them both to the dorms and excitedly introduced them as well as showed them off. Everyone was a little wary but polite regardless, save for one, Shoto. Shoto just kept staring directly at Dabai. Shoto also kept tilting his head from side to side like a confused puppy as he did this. His eyes narrowed while he just watched Dabai. What? Dabai finally hissed towards Shoto. You got something you want to say, Peppermint? Everyone was looking at the two at this point. Shoto just had that confused look on his face before he shook his head. No, you look like someone I knew, but he shook his head. It can't be, he's dead. Then Shoto looked away from Dabai and the others. Dabai scoffed and turned away from where Shoto had fled to focus more on Toga and the others. Hey, Toga bounced off of the couch and jumped towards Hitoshi who was debating going after Shoto but now couldn't. What's with the cat? I've never seen a green one before. Oh, this is Mossy. He's our vice class rep. Kaminari told her with a smile as he hung off of the side of the couch. Really? That's amazing. I bet he tastes yummy. And just like that the room became heavy with tension and wide eyes. Hitoshi found himself taking a sudden step away from this girl. Toga frowned suddenly and then looked down. Oh, I did it again, she whispered shyly. I didn't mean it like that. I mean I did, it's weird, okay. I don't want to actually eat him. It's complicated. Toga groaned as she dragged her hands down her face and then proceeded to sit in between Dabai and Jin. What was that? Hitoshi gave Toga a look. It was like some part of you switched gears. You don't have to tell him a thing. Toga, you should tell him everything. Jin spoke with two different voices contradicting each other. Hitoshi Moss spoke suddenly and without care. I can't describe it, but there's something about this girl that's been bugging me. Like, I know her. Hitoshi turned towards Moss. Dabai's eyes narrowed as eyed Hitoshi up and down. What was that? He suddenly demanded, and that made Hitoshi turn back towards him in alarm. I know what I saw. Your eyes lit up, and I mean that in a literal sense. You telepathic or something. If you have something you want to say. Dabai then stood, and him being a grown adult he was tall but not taller than Hitoshi. Hitoshi was still taller than him by an inch. It happened fast when Monoma and Takoyami immediately flanked Hitoshi's sides with dark shadow above Hitoshi's head growling. Everyone was on their feet but nobody was taking sides just yet as they waited to see who would make the first move. I am telepathic, Hitoshi found himself admitting. but not to anybody else here. He then picked Moss up and held his cat up to Dabai. I communicate with my cat telepathically because he's not a normal cat. When he talks to me, his eyes glow just the same, right, Moss? You're aware of what you're doing, right? Moss asked as he looked back at Hitoshi. I know, but I need them to trust me. If that means exposing us, then. What? Everyone, including Dark Shadow and Takoyami, yelled at him in surprise once it became clear that Hitoshi was, in fact, not lying. Moss is a special cat. He's borderline human in his thoughts, and it's because of him I learned that I can attempt telepathy. He's helped me expand my quirk in a way that I never would have thought of. I apologize if you thought I was talking behind your backs. That was never my intention. I was merely talking to Moss. Moss then mewed in obvious agreement. Dabai looked from Moss to Hitoshi. 8. Never would have expected that. Then he sat back down. My bad. Hitoshi snorted and let Moss rest back on his shoulder. So ... what was he asking? Toga was the brave soul to ask Hitoshi after a few moments of silence. I already told him I wasn't going to eat him. He wasn't asking me anything. He was just telling me that you seem familiar to him. Toga gave a weak laugh. I think I would remember a cat like that. Even when I was on the streets, I saw lots of stray cats. None green, though. There's just something about those eyes now that I think about it. Toga leaned over Dabai to get a better look at Moss. Moss narrowed his eyes. No, there's something about her that just feels so familiar. Her teeth, Hitoshi, her teeth. Hitoshi looked at Toga's eyes and then to her teeth as she was smiling. Wide and vampiric, identical to Naisa's own teeth. Oh my god, then it struck Hitoshi as he took a step back in alarm. You weren't always quirkless, were you? Toga's smile dropped and for a moment she looked confused before the smile returned. Wow, you're really smart. You figured it out so quickly. And she stood. Jin and Dabai both kept sharp eyes out as she approached Hitoshi. How do ya know? She inquired, and Hitoshi just stared at her teeth before looking once more at Moss. Everyone was looking at them now with rapt interest as no more than 30 seconds ago, Toga was thought to be completely quirkless, and now they were here. Moss picked it up. It's her teeth. They're vampiric in style, much like someone we've met who has a quirk that doesn't belong to him. Then Toga's happy demeanor changed as she growled at Hitoshi with the light leaving her eyes. I think I know exactly who you're talking about. Her fists clenched tightly. That boy, right? The one with the green hair, the one that's not even alive. That's the one. I like to call him Nice. We were told his name was Izuku or some shit like that. Dabai gave a heavy sigh as he stood next to Toga. They heard our precious Toga and took her quirk. Who said that? Not me. Twice was beside Toga, the same as Dabai. But still, he didn't stop. We tried to take her quirk back, but they warped us here. Toga explained to Hitoshi as she finished for Twice. But yes, they took my quirk to give to that thing. What was your quirk, if you don't mind me asking? Hitoshi asked amongst the shocked mutters of his other classmates. They can just do that. Mina whispered to Denki. I guess so. I've never heard of someone being able to take a quirk and give it to someone else. Denki whispered. Oh, Toga, that's awful. Achako spoke louder than the others. This made Toga look at Achako with a mixture of shock and surprise. I can't imagine having my quirk forcibly ripped away from me and given to that thing from the USJ. Hagakura hissed. Shapeshifting. Toga turned back to Hitoshi. My quirk was shapeshifting. If you drank blood, you'd be able to shapeshift into that person. Bakugo grumbled as he sat on the back of the couch the others were just sitting on. Right, Toga nodded. That's it. Yeah, both Bakugo and I have run into that quirk more often than not. Hitoshi explained to her. He's turned into me twice. Yes? What do want? Jin asked so suddenly that it made Hitoshi jolt in alarm. Ignore him. Dabai waved Jin off. Why is that thing hunting you guys? What does it want? Hitoshi rubbed the back of his neck and then looked at Moss. It's hard to say. He wants multiple things from multiple people and he's dead set on getting those things. But Toga, you are right. He's not alive. Toga rolled her eyes. Yeah, it was obvious the moment I laid my eyes on him, and he crossed the wrong path by taking my quirk, and I won't rest until I get my quirk back. We could use this to our advantage, Hitoshi. Moss jumped in as he looked at Hitoshi. What do you mean? She knows her quirk better than anybody. We may be able to find weaknesses to help bring Nice down. Hitoshi thought about it. What'd the cat say? Dabai demanded when Hitoshi suddenly became thoughtful. He says we may be able to use her help if you're willing. Hitoshi looked at Toga as he said this. Who knows your quirk better than you, right? If we can find a weakness, then we'll be ready for the next attack, whenever or wherever it may be. The light in Toga's eyes returned full force. You want my help? I do. You know, Bakugo jumped from the back of the couch into the floor. Nice is more than just her quirk, right? He then crossed his arms over his chest. He has that healing factor for sure which could hinder any and all weaknesses void. You're true, but we need something to work with, Bakugo. You're not just the only one he's royally pissed at because Hitoshi scratched at his face. Asked Takoyami. I more or less forced Nice to hate me and odds are I'm at the top of his hit list. Bakugo hummed. I suppose you have a point. Toga leveled her eyes with Hitoshi and then took Bakugo. I don't care if he hates me or not. I just want what's rightfully mine, and if I get to help take that thing down, I'm more than willing. Here's how my quirk works. Everyone was crowding around Toga, notebooks out as they hastily wrote. This was something all of Class 1 rallied together on. Something that needed to be stopped before he, got even more powerful and out of control. It was how Jin, Dabai, and Toga all became unofficial members of WhatIf that were welcomed into the dorms anytime. That night, before Hitoshi made it back to his dorm, he was hounded by the class for keeping his telepathy with Moss a secret from them, and then asked for about an hour about how it was done. Then 2, grabbed by Shoto and hauled into the other boys' dorm with no warning. Whoa, what's up? I'm going to say something crazy. Shoto cut Hitoshi off and then went to his desk where he showed Hitoshi a whiteboard hanging on the wall. It was like something out of a movie with pictures thrown up, taped on the board, and then had crisscrossing red strings to each picture. I believe Dabai is my dead brother who came back to life. Okay, why? Oh boy. Hitoshi really wished he hadn't asked that. Next thing he knew, he and Moss were sitting on Shoto's bed as Shoto divulged into his family history and about what happened to Tae, which was sad. But then he followed it up with this rant about how Dabai was absolutely his dead brother. But Talia has white hair, Hitoshi had pointed out. I thought about that. I believe it was the fire that turned his hair black. Fire doesn't work like that, my dude. Shoto hummed as he rubbed at his eyes and stared at this board of his with intensity. I just wish I knew what it all means. All of these people and coincidences. It's leading to something, I know it is. Honey, Hitoshi sighed. You're not making much sense to me right now. Then Hitoshi spotted a name on the board. What's with that name? He asked as he pointed to it. Kikayo. Does it mean anything? Kikayo. Oh yeah, another thing that just doesn't make sense to me but has to be connected. Yeah, I met this woman in the same hospital my mother stays in. Yeah, your mom that you visit every weekend. Yes, and this woman, Shoto laughed a little. She said she was your mother when she saw a picture of you, but that can't be right. Hitoshi felt like someone dumped a bucket of ice water down his back. What? His voice became small and tight. What did you just say? She said she was your mother. But look, I'm going to find your real mother, trust me. God, how can someone so smart be? Hitoshi cut himself off before he said something he was going to regret. What hospital is this? He demanded in a voice that made Moss jump a little. Shoto looked at him in shock. It's a mental facility. The Osaka mental facility to be exact. Hitoshi nearly left Moss for his scramble for the door. He did turn around and take his cat back. Of course, he didn't even say goodbye to Shoto. Hitoshi nearly knocked down Monoma on his way out of the dorms entirely. Sorry, he called over his shoulder before he left for the apartments. She's a pretty lady, isn't she? Hitoshi father asked him. His face was completely blank in Hitoshi's mind now as he showed 6-year-old Hitoshi a picture of his Hitoshi's mother. In his mind, this picture was also blank. I'm hoping maybe she'll get clean before too long, then we can all be a happy family again. Of course, there's still the matter of your quirk, but in due time, I suppose. By the time Hitoshi made it to his foster's apartment, he was panting and sweating. Any makeup he may have been wearing was in streaks and he didn't care. Dear, Hazashi asked from the table as he was the first to spot Hitoshi. Everything okay? My mother. Lead. First time in. Ever. He wheezed out and missed how Hazashi's eyes went wide. Mother, you have a mother. Addict. Drugs. Unstable. Hitoshi continued to wheeze. Never met. Akasa mental facility. Please. Hazashi almost looked torn at this as he looked at the table. How strange. He whispered. You're not the only one whose mother made a sudden appearance. And Hitoshi didn't like what Hazashi meant by that. Bonus. Boss, you back with us? Yeah, boss. What happened? You were affected by a quirk, but don't worry. We got a specialist to erase it from your body. A quirk? Yeah, hard to explain really. But it was messing with your brains. But again, don't worry. The doctor assured us that it should have worn off by now. Do you know who this is? A picture was given to the boss and he looked at it. His brow furrowed for several seconds before recognition sparked in his eyes. That goddamn brat. He roared in rage as he stood up. If I didn't need the brat, I would kill her 10 times over. Welcome back, Overhaul. One of Overhaul's henchmen bowed at him but did not touch him. We've missed you this last year. How bad has everything been halted? Overhaul demanded as he started to pace around. No, don't answer. It's all coming to me, bad. Because of that boy. Boy. Where is the girl? Overhaul demanded. It's unknown currently, but we have people looking into it. When you find her, there's most likely going to be a boy with her as well. Bring him to me as well. He will pay for making a fool out of me. Overhaul huffed heavily as anger coursed through his veins. Nobody makes a fool of him. Nobody. Izuku padded up to Eri and then jumped into her lap. The little girl was sitting at the dinner table with her 3 fathers and Hitoshi all looking at her. I don't understand, she finally said softly. Hazashi sighed deeply as he looked at his 2 husbands before looking back at her. Well, your mother wants to see you, dear. She emailed me personally about it. Yes, you told me that, but why? Her confusion only grew while Izuku allowed her to pick him up and hold her against his chest. She gently scratched behind his ears while still looking confused. She hates me. She said I was a cursed child and that she doesn't want anything to do with me anymore because I made Daddy vanish. Yuri clasped her hands over her ears and shook her head so wildly that her ponytail wiggled from side to side. Baby, Izashi put a hand on her shoulder. If you don't want to see her again, that's fine. She sounds okay, a horrible person. Oboro whispered to Shouta in a voice so soft that Izuku was only able to pick up on it because of his sharp hearing. Yeah, no SHT, Shouta whispered back. But if she wants to see me then, shouldn't I at least hear her out? Yuri whispered as she looked at her lap with misty eyes. Maybe she wants to apologize. That's what you taught me, right? That when people are mean to you then they should apologize. Maybe she realized she was being mean and wants to say sorry to me. The three men looked at one another with varying degrees of distrust on their faces. Surprisingly, it was Hitoshi who kept the positive outlook up. Yeah, maybe, Hitoshi told her with a smile. Was it because he too just learned not too long ago that his own mother is out there? Or was it because he really believed it? Izuku didn't know. Yuri looked at Hitoshi and then back down at her lap. Would you see your mommy again? She asked Hitoshi. If she asked, well, our situation is different, sweetie. I've never met my mother, Hitoshi told her in a soft voice. I want to meet her again, but I want you with me, big brother. She grabbed Hitoshi's hand. I don't want to be alone with her. Oh, trust me, you won't be, Shouta shook his head. I'm sure we all will be there. It was unanimous as all the fathers nodded along with Shouta's claim. There was no way they were letting Yuri be alone, even if this woman was her mother. Yuri gave a shy smile at this and then looked at Izuku. And you'll be there too, right, Mossy? She asked the cat. Izuku nodded and she then hugged him tightly, but not too tightly. Then, I'll meet her. Hisashi didn't look too happy but was doing his best to hide it. In fact, none of the Fosters looked particularly happy. Even so when Hisashi looked at Hitoshi. And do you want to meet your mother as well? You said she was. Where? Now it was Hitoshi that looked down at his hands, be it out of embarrassment or thoughtfulness. Todoroki claimed that she found him in Akasa mental facility, I think. If it is her, I just want to. He paused and actually thought about it. What did he want to do? Did he want to just talk? Ask her questions? Yell at her? He didn't know. It must have shown on his face as Hisashi patted his hand. You just want to meet her, I'm sure. Hitoshi thought about it some more and decided ... Yeah, really that's all he wanted to do. For 16 years he was told about his mother, about how she was a druggie, about how she abandoned him for drugs, abandoned his father alike. Hitoshi just wanted to meet her. Izuku watched Hitoshi for a few moments before he wriggled himself out of Yuri's arms and jumped on Hitoshi's shoulder. Hitoshi absent-mindedly reached up and scratched under Izuku's chin. Izuku raised his head up, loving the touch he was being given. Well, it's the same as with Yuri. When we find this woman, we'll all be with you, Hitoshi. Shouta promised first and he scooted out of his seat. He then ruffled Hitoshi's hair as he passed the boy. Hitoshi and Izuku both watched him go before looking at each other. Did I upset him? Hitoshi shut his eyes as he thought this. I hope not ... In fact they all look really unhappy, even Oboro. Oboro wasn't smiling as he stared at a nearby wall and just seemed lost in thought. Hitoshi just felt awkward as time ticked on and finally it got too much and he stood. I think I'm going back to the dorms now. Mossy, you joining? He asked as he pointed at Izuku. Izuku looked at him, thought, and shook his head. I'm going to stay with Brat for a little longer. I'll be back before dark. Okay. And Hitoshi put Izuku down on the table. See you guys later. Bye. Hisashi called and Oboro only smiled a very small smile. Hey, Oboro stopped Hitoshi from completely walking out the door. Yes, Papa. You know we love you, right? Oboro asked and Hitoshi blinked. Of course. And I love you. Hitoshi smiled at them. Bye. Then, he left. Izuku looked at Oboro, who looked at him and then stood. I think it's time for my patrol. Izuku watched him go out the door briskly. Yuri was already going back to her room and this just left Hisashi. Hisashi sighed once it was the two of them. I'm worried, Moss. Hisashi finally admitted as he picked Izuku up and held him close to his chest. Izuku purred and allowed this. The man was gentle in his touch and hold. Hitoshi mother doesn't have a chance in hell. Not if she's admitted fully to a mental hospital ... But Yuri's mother ... If she demands guardianship and the courts deem her as fit, she could very well take Yuri away. That would crush not just us but Hitoshi. I know he was just saying what he thought was best but we were hoping to dissuade Yuri from meeting with that awful woman. Does that make us awful? Wouldn't say awful. Selfish, yes, but not awful. Izuku answered knowing full well that Hisashi couldn't understand him. The man smiled and tucked Izuku's head under his chin. Izuku kept on purring as he rubbed against Hisashi's chin before he spotted Brat and demanded to be let down. Okay. Hisashi gave a tiny laugh and tossed Izuku, gently, to the ground. Immediately, Brat started to hop around Izuku in excitement. Izuku returned the excitement in full and the two of them tumbled in a play fight. A play fight that would quickly turn into a dog pile when Pumpkin and Brine joined in. Soon it really just turned into Izuku and Pumpkin going from a simple play fight to a more aggressive play fight. No claws were used, but they certainly weren't gentle with one another either. The fight would dispel when Aizawa shook a bag of treats, getting everyone's attention. Everyone got one, including Izuku, and the cats went off to do their own thing after that. Izuku spotted Brat looking outside of the glass window leading to the balcony, so he joined her. "It's so surreal," she whispered to Izuku, her once scraggly voice gone with a younger voice that made her seem like a new cat entirely, especially since she sounded so young. "One moment I was laying on the blanket and the next thing I knew I was young again." She looked at her paws and flexed them to show her claws. "I have my claws again and I'm shorter than you." She looked at him and he looked at her. "It's almost like Pumpkin, but I remember everything. I feel like a new cat, but I'm not." Izuku looked away from her and looked out of the balcony. "I know what you mean," he whispered to her. "It's weird. You don't even think it could be real, but it is. I feel like I was given a new life." "Yeah." Brat leaned against Izuku's wild fur and then just sighed, but it was a happy sigh. "I'm glad. I feel like I could go on forever with this new chance. Just take it from a professional. Don't be careless. You won't get another." "That's true. I won't," she purred before laying down and turning herself into a loaf on the floor. "And neither will you. So, don't go chasing after any more dogs, okay? I don't think dogs are a problem anymore for us. At least none like the last." "That's good." But Izuku didn't feel at ease as in the back of his mind. In the far back in a dark and deserted corner, he can always feel eyes watching him, waiting for the next slip up. Hitoshi and Takoyami circled around each other. Both boys were dressed in gym shorts and tank tops of different colors, red for Hitoshi and black for Takoyami. They each had fake wooden daggers in their hands as they were in a gym and couldn't be seen with actual knives. The aim of the game was to either disarm their opponent or get the other to surrender. There are rules, of course, nothing below the belt, no biting, eye poking. Hitting was allowed, but if you get bruised then that's on you. Oh, and of course no quirks. Hitoshi had his wooden dagger pointed down and tucked against his wrist, tucked away but waiting for a moment to strike. Takoyami had his dagger out and clenched tightly in his hand, ready and not waiting. They were squared up and ready to strike by waiting for the other to strike. Finally, it was Takoyami that charged. Hitoshi waited as Takoyami ran at him, prepared to strike. When Takoyami was close enough, Hitoshi threw his arm out and the two daggers clacked together for a moment. But Takoyami, being the more experienced out of the two of them, used that to his advantage and suddenly wrapped his free arm around Hitoshi's dagger-wielding arm in an attempt to disarm him. Hitoshi used this to his advantage and pulled Takoyami in with that very arm. Takoyami moved a step in and that's all Hitoshi needed. Takoyami really didn't expect the headbutt to the side of the face, nor, while stunned, Hitoshi knocked his leg against the back of Takoyami's leg and sent him flying to the ground in an instant. Well, Hitoshi wasn't the only one with a trick up his sleeve. Takoyami hit the ground, but not before kicking the wooden dagger out of Hitoshi's hand, disarming Hitoshi and thus winning. Clever. Hitoshi sighed and looked at this abandoned wooden blade. "You almost had me," Takoyami grumbled and extended his hand out for Hitoshi to take. Hitoshi did and helped his friend up to his feet. "I wasn't expecting that headbutt, that's for sure." He then rubbed at the sore spot where Hitoshi had slammed his face into. "A dangerous move, might I add, as I have a beak." Hitoshi gave a small laugh at that. It was a calculated risk. "Hey, are you coming to the mall with us on Saturday?" Hitoshi asked, changing the subject while grabbing his wooden dagger from the ground. "The mall? Yeah, some of us are getting sanctioned leave to go and get stuff needed for the summer camp coming up. I need a few things, so I'm going." "I see." Takoyami thought about it for a moment. "I suppose I may need new shoes. I don't think I own anything appropriate for hiking. I'll ask my parents for money." Hitoshi smiled. "Great, I'll be sure to add you to the list. The more the better, literally, safety in numbers and whatnot." Dark shadow poked out of Takoyami's head and gave a happy chirp as she watched Hitoshi. Hitoshi waved at her. "You know," Takoyami cleared his throat a little and was thankful for his black feathers. "When we were sparring you were a tad rigid and your movements a little not smooth. The pulling could easily be used against you if the villain had a weapon of their own." Hitoshi listened to Takoyami's words and then hummed. "You're right. I need to be smoother with my techniques. I need to. Perhaps if I were to treat it like a dance." "A dance?" Hitoshi smiled and nodded. "It's silly. I know nobody is going to come at me pirouetting, but maybe I should start treating fighting as more of a dance to help loosen myself up." Perhaps Takoyami was silenced when Hitoshi turned and hooked his phone up to a Bluetooth speaker from his bag. "Maybe it would help if I just get used to the idea first." And he reached into his duffel bag and pulled out his slippers. "You just have those with you?" Takoyami inquired and Hitoshi nodded. "It's easier to have everything with me, be it working out or ballet practice," Hitoshi explained. This way I don't leave anything behind by accident. He took his tennis shoes off and put on his slippers. They were still demi-soles as he wasn't able to have point shoes yet. One more year and he'll be able to advance to that stage. I'm a little surprised at the music. Takoyami hummed as the piano music filled the air. What? You didn't think we'd just dance to the Nutcracker all day, did you? Hitoshi lightly teased with a smile as he slipped into his shoes. Takoyami, once again, was thankful for his feathers for hiding his shame. Once Hitoshi was ready and stretched properly for simple moves, he stood and got into position as he would in ballet class. Takoyami sat on a nearby bench and simply watched as Hitoshi started to dance to the music. Hitoshi wasn't doing anything fancy, simple ballet moves to get himself warmed up properly. Then, when he was confident in himself, he reached out for Takoyami. Okay, let's try simple moves. Takoyami, who wasn't sure how this would go, simply nodded and grabbed the fake dagger and got in front of Hitoshi like he was going to attack. The slow music that filled the gym didn't help his sudden nerves. Still, Takoyami went for it and Hitoshi dodged almost expertly with a pirouette, and when Takoyami turned, Hitoshi was in an arabesque position and waiting. Takoyami went to attack again, but this time Hitoshi blocked him by putting his arm out, and once Takoyami's arm was past a certain point, Hitoshi grabbed that very arm and twisted himself inwards as if he was going to pull Takoyami into a dance. He didn't. Once they were touching, Hitoshi twisted Takoyami into a large circle and sent the other flying away. Takoyami stumbled back in surprise. Oh, of course. It finally hit him. If your opponent has no knowledge of the dance, then you have the upper hand. If it looks stupid but it works, then it's not stupid. Hitoshi balanced back in 3 quick steps. So, come at me. Takoyami would try again. And again, but Hitoshi literally danced circles around him with his knowledge of ballet and Takoyami's lack thereof. You know, Takoyami, you should try ballet. Hitoshi told him during this. Not for me. Takoyami shook his head at the thought. Fair. Takoyami came at him and Hitoshi grabbed his friend's wrist, knocking the dagger out of Takoyami's palm as he pulled Takoyami in. For a moment, Takoyami wondered if Hitoshi grew, but no. Hitoshi was on his toes, the very tips, before he lowered himself down to the flats of his feet. I think you'd be good at it. Hitoshi smiled, his eyes soft and his expression relatively lax. I will say ... you do look graceful when you leap and pirouette. Thank you. There's more to ballet than just dancing on your toes. That's what a bunch of people don't understand. Hitoshi then let Takoyami go. Could you show me? Takoyami stopped himself, but it was too late as Hitoshi was already looking at him. Maybe just something basic. We'd be here for a while just teaching you the basics, I'm afraid. But, tell you what, I'll dance with you. Hitoshi offered. And I'll just show you where to move, and if you decide you like ballet, then I'll teach you a little more. Oh, okay. Takoyami gulped when Hitoshi positioned himself behind Takoyami. What's your weight? I can lift Momo and Monoma well, but I just need to be sure I can do the same for you. For a moment his weight was forgotten. Whoa, Hitoshi, deciding for himself, put his hands on Takoyami's hips and lifted him. Oh yeah, you're close to Monoma's weight, so this'll be easy. Hitoshi gently put Takoyami on the ground. Then the dance started. We're going to go back a few steps. You can hop or skip a step. Hitoshi instructed and Takoyami followed his instruction to a T and skipped back a few steps while Hitoshi led him. I'm going to dip you. Just make sure to loosen your back and don't freak. I have you. Hitoshi reassured him and Takoyami did as he instructed. Takoyami was dipped forward and he was dipped low as Hitoshi leaned in, keeping one strong arm firm against Takoyami's back. Takoyami had no thoughts as he forgot they were even in a gym at this point. It felt like they were a stage with a spotlight shining down on them. Takoyami and Hitoshi moved a little clunky in this dance. But that's just because Takoyami wasn't as skilled as Hitoshi. Yet, Hitoshi never seemed to mind as he instructed Takoyami where to go and how to do it. It ended when Hitoshi broke away in a pirouette and then got down with his knee tucked under him and his arms out. I'll catch you, he promised. Takoyami believed him with no question asked as he allowed Hitoshi to lift him. Hitoshi didn't even shake as he caught Takoyami by his waist and lifted him up into the air. For a moment Takoyami couldn't even describe it as he was in the air being held up while Hitoshi stayed in that same position on the ground. Then the moment was ruined by clapping. Bravo, Jesus. Hitoshi, being stunned, dropped Takoyami. Oof, I am so sorry. Hitoshi quickly helped Takoyami up to his feet as both boys looked towards Mirio. Mirio was with his friends as they all looked interested, except for Tamaki, who was doing everything in his power not to look as he tucked himself away in a corner. Mirio was still clapping. Talk about a show. I certainly wasn't expecting that. Hitoshi turned scarlet as he looked away from the others. I'm glad you liked it, he whispered softly. I wasn't expecting an audience. Neither was I. I liked it. Dark shadow popped out of Takoyami's shoulder. You should both do that again sometime. Yes, maybe another, but it's getting late. Hitoshi looked at the time on his phone. I have to go. I promised the Fosters I'd eat with them today. They got it in their head that all I'm eating in the dorms is ramen. But that is all you eat. Takoyami snorted. Hitoshi packed his bags and smiled. Well, I never said they were exaggerating. See you, Takoyami, Mirio, Nejire, Tamaki. Hitoshi bid his goodbye to all of them respectfully as he made sure his bag was packed up and on his arm. He didn't even change out of his slippers as he retreated, but before he left he looked over his shoulder and those indigo eyes bore into Takoyami. For what it's worth, you'd make a wonderful black swan. Then he left. Takoyami watched him go with a small smile before he too packed and left the gym to the big three. This left Takoyami both over the moon and ... if not a tad offended by that last statement. Yuimaru was the name of Iri's mother. Something went wrong with the Akasa facility. Hitoshi didn't know what, but there was nobody by the name of Shinsu there. So, he'd have to ask Todoroki next time he'd see him if this person was really his mother. It could have been a crazy woman saying anyone was her son for all Hitoshi knew. It left him rather disappointed, but he didn't have time to be disappointed. Now, it was time for them all to be there for Iri, as promised. Iri's mother did not want to come to UA. Red flag. She insisted that they all come and meet her at the local McDonald's. Seeing how 3 heroes were going to be there, and a hero in training, it was decided that would be fine, as long as it was in public and not alone at her house. Perhaps that's the reason she wanted to do McDonald's. Yui was sitting at a table with another man who looked elated to see Iri as she hopped up. Yui looked to be in her late 30s. Her hair was long and brown and put up into a ponytail. As Ashi put both of his hands on Iri's shoulders and pulled her back into him, Iri didn't seem to want to pull away. She didn't even look happy to see this woman, and Hitoshi couldn't blame her. Here, Hitoshi handed moss to Iri and Iri held him quietly. Immediately the woman stopped and took a step back. Oh, Yui was now closer and Hitoshi was able to see little things about her. Her face had a smattering of freckles across her nose. Her eyes were a honey brown and she had a gap between her 2 front teeth. Iri looked almost nothing like her. They had the same eye shape and same smile as well as nose, but aside from that, the woman looked uncomfortable as she looked at the cat in Iri's arms. Moss looked at her and his ears went flat on his head in clear distrust. I'd rather not have a cat here, Yui stated, and Iri just looked at her before looking back at Hitoshi. Mossy isn't a normal cat, Iri stated finally. He's really smart and knows to stay on the ground, or on Big Brother's shoulder. That did not ease the woman's mind as she just stared at Moss. I guess ... if he's just away from me, that's fine. The woman was trying to control her face, it was obvious. Now come, I already ordered for you, let's talk. I already ate, Iri told the woman. So, I'm not hungry. The woman sucked in a breath at this. And why, when you guys knew we'd be coming here? She asked in a leveled voice at the 3 Fosters. We try to limit fast food intake, for one. We don't mind once in a while, but we already had fast food this week. Aburo was the one to explain while he walked with Iri and the others to the table. Not only that, but Iri doesn't really like McDonald's. Yui scoffed. What child doesn't like McDonald's? Iri, Hazashi repeated. It's true, Iri admitted. Their nuggets taste weird and the burgers are too greasy. She told Yui as she sat down where some nuggets were laying in wait. But that's fine. Iri then handed Moss to Hitoshi. Hitoshi smiled and held Moss like a baby. Mossy loves nuggets and she took one to give to Moss. You are not feeding those to a cat, Yui said sternly, which made Iri pause and then put the nugget down. Sorry, she whispered and immediately was patted on the head by Shouta. Let's just skip the pleasantries. Shouta finally spoke. What do you want? His eyes were calculating as he stared at the woman and then to the man sitting with her. The man wasn't part of the equation. He was a short man with blonde hair and green eyes. He was slightly pudgy but nothing too wild. He looked a bit plain. Right, this is my husband, Takashi, Yui said matter-of-factly. I felt it best if he attended with us today. If you're going to be blunt, then I'll be blunt. Seeing how Iri seems to finally has a grasp on her quirk, I want her back. I don't want to live with you. Iri didn't give anybody else a chance to speak as she cut Yui off. Seeing how you're being blunt and all, well, you have no say. I think I do. Iri looked at her mother with a leveled stare. You gave me to Kai, and I think you have no say. Her mother's fists clenched as her face turned angry. Who do you think you're talking to, young lady? I'm the adult. Chairs scraped and 2 clattered. The moment Yui stood, all 3 of the Fosters were out of the seats, with all of them having one hand on Iri, daring Yui to try anything. Iri would wriggle out from under their hands so she could sit in Hitoshi's lap. Hitoshi held onto her and Moss jumped onto her shoulders so he could watch. Iri, get off that boy's lap, Yui demanded after a few seconds of tense silence. You're being embarrassing. He's my big brother, but you wouldn't know that, would you? Iri shot back as she hid her face in Hitoshi's neck. He is not. He is, Iri shouted back with vigor. Hitoshi is my older brother. He knows me the most. He knows what it's like to be unloved by someone who's supposed to love you. He knows what it's like to be hurt time and time again by someone who's supposed to be family. He knows what it's like to rather be homeless eating out of garbage cans than go back to our abusers. Hitoshi was the very first person to ever show me kindness, even when I told him my quirk. Why? Because he has a quirk he doesn't like. He, by every right, is my big brother. And Inari sucked in an uneasy breath as tears collected in her eyes. I know why I want to talk to you now. To yell at you. How dare you just demand I leave my family? I love my daddies and my big brother. And they love me. You didn't love me. You called me a curse. And you gave up. Yui's face fell as she looked at Eri for a few moments more, and then her shoulders slumped as she wilted visibly. I see. Eri puffed her cheeks out in an almost comical pout before she put her face against the crook of Hitoshi's neck again, and Hitoshi silently patted Eri's back. I see. Yui repeated before she stood. I'm your mother. You stopped being my mommy when you gave me away. Eri didn't even look at her. Just go. I don't want a mommy like you. I have 3 daddies who actually love me and who will never give me away or call me a curse. Yui went quiet and then she grabbed her purse. Let's go, Takashi. We'll find something else, I guess. Something else. Shouta scoffed. Something else. The woman's face turned red. If you must know, I'm infertile. Eri was my last chance for a biological child. I knew it. Hitoshi shook his head before sneering at her but not saying anything more. Yui just looked at him and turned hurrying out so quickly that Takashi nearly tripped over the chair to follow behind her. Silence followed before everyone visibly relaxed. I was too harsh, wasn't I? Eri asked when she broke away from Hitoshi to look at her dads. Sometimes, people just need that wake-up call. Aburo told her and got down on one knee to look at her. You spoke what was on your mind and that makes me happy. You don't have to take BS from anyone and you're learning your worth. Eri smiled a watery smile at him before sniffling. Thanks, Papa. Come on. Shouta offered his hand and Eri took it to hop off of Hitoshi's lap. Moss balanced on her shoulders before he was picked up by Hisashi and held against the man's chest. Let's go home. I agree. Eri puffed her chest out happily. Nugget. Hitoshi offered the breaded nugget to Moss, who was more than happy for such a treat. Bonus. Izuku stretched himself out on the balcony of the Fosters. The apartment was abuzz with the Fosters going back and forth on this surprise that they want to give the children. Izuku just wanted some alone time. Such alone time is what resulted in him perking his ears up suddenly. A strong smell wafted through the air and his nose twitched. The smell was deep and calling to him. Izuku stood up quickly and jumped up to the railing. Outside. For now, stay on the balcony. Fairy, Vlad spoke from the balcony next to theirs. He put his cat outside. This cat looked like him, only she was a normal colored cat. She was a ragdoll that was clearly a pure breed cat and not fixed. She smelt. Oh, I gotta go. Izuku realized as his pupils expanded the moment he looked at her. This cat was thick-furred, like him. Her body was white, but her legs were dark brown. Her toes were white, and her face was masked in dark brown fur as well as her ears, but she had a white hourglass on the bridge of her nose. She had the biggest and bluest eyes and her smell. I gotta go. He cried out loud. I gotta go. Gotta go. Open the door. He yowled and patted the balcony door. Hello. Izuku's breath stuttered as he turned to look at the other cat who was now on their balcony. Her smell was almost overpowering. This was a cat in heat. And Izuku wasn't neutered. Can you help me? Izuku laid across Hitoshi's shoulder as Hitoshi walked into the mall with Mina, Achako, Toga, Sue, Takoyami, Siro, and It's a shame the others couldn't all come with us, Ribbit, Sue commented as she attached herself to Achako's arm, who was out of the cast and just put into a boot. She should be fully healed tomorrow, who already had her other arm claimed by Toga. Toga was invited along, and by that it means she invited herself along and nobody had the heart to tell her no. Toga was skipping along despite the fact that Achako and Sue were not. She was beaming the entire time. It's just a safety precaution. Ada gently moved his glasses up. Too many hero students will make us a target. So, the teachers felt it best that we go in groups. Siro shrugged. Well, we shouldn't be long. What's our time frame? 2 hours, Mina answered for him. And Dad made it clear if we aren't back within the time limit he's hunting us down. Hitoshi reminded them. Easy peasy, Toga said happily as she did a little shimmy dance. Can we get Starbucks? She happily asked as she spotted the famous coffee place that was crowded as usual. Starbucks doesn't sound all that bad, Mina mumbled while giving her lips a little lick at the idea. But that'll take time. Allow me. Ada chopped his hand suddenly. Why don't you guys just give me your orders and money and I'll make sure you get what you want? Hitoshi put his hands in his pockets. But that'll take some time away from you. I don't need to get much. I already have a lot of camping gear. I just need to make sure that I have a sleeping bag, which isn't hard to get. You're the best, Ada. Toga hugged him tightly, making the boy blush. Yes, of course. Ada straightened himself up and cleared his throat. Write down your orders. You gonna get something? Izuku asked while he stayed draped over Hitoshi like a scarf. Hitoshi thought about it and nodded. Yeah, just get me a triple espresso. He put his hands in his pockets while others just looked at him. Just a triple espresso? Achako asked and Hitoshi nodded. I don't need anything else. I'm not into those sugary drinks. So, a triple shot espresso, please. All right. We'll all meet back here in 30 minutes, Ida declared firmly, and everyone decided on it. They would all then split up to go to their respective stores. Hitoshi Takoyami walked up to him and had his hands shoved into the pouch of his hoodie. What do you need to get? Perhaps we could stay together. I don't need much, just some sunscreen in all actuality. Sunscreen, that's all. Hitoshi nodded. I'm whiter than sour cream. The sun will turn me into a crisp. Hitoshi dramatically draped his hand over his head as he said this. This nearly caused Izuku to slide off of him, but thankfully Izuku managed to correct himself before that happened. Takoyami gave a rare smile at Hitoshi's lame joke. Aside from that, I already have everything I need. I need hiking boots, and perhaps I should also invest in some sunscreen. Takoyami looked at his hands before shoving them back into his hoodie pouch. Good. Let's go to the shoe store first so we can get your boots, and then we'll go and get the sunscreen. Sounds like a plan. Takoyami agreed. So, off they went. The mall was huge and, perusal, packed. So, after looking at directions, they decided on which shoe store to go to. The shoe store was on the second floor, so up the escalator they went. When Takoyami stepped on, he stepped a little too short and nearly fell, but Hitoshi was quick to grab his hand. I got you. Hitoshi smiled at him and quickly pulled him up to the step he was on. Takoyami gave a little cough and quickly retracted his hand back into his little hoodie while looking away. Izuku only snorted as he watched this interaction. Clueless, he noted. Together, Takoyami and Hitoshi went to the shoe department. While Takoyami tried on new hiking boots, Hitoshi was looking at some tennis shoes. He wasn't planning on buying anything as he was just looking. Izuku stretched himself out and just lazily smacked his lips. Someone's birthday is coming up, Izuku noted, and it made Hitoshi smile a little. I guess it is, isn't it? I don't want anything, in case you were going to ask, Hitoshi remarked as he picked up a shoe and tossed it over in his hands a few times. I have enough, I think. He smiled and gently scratched Izuku's ear. This made Izuku purr a little as he lifted his head up to allow this. Too bad, Izuku responded. This made Hitoshi smile a little as he then looked around some more. It wouldn't be too long before Takoyami returned to Hitoshi's side with shoes picked out and in a bag. Hitoshi smiled at him and they walked out together. Hitoshi, pet store. Izuku perked his head up as they passed by a pet store that was showing off the latest batch of kittens in the window. I dunno, Mossy, we'd told them we'd be ready in 30 minutes. Hitoshi told Izuku, and it made Takoyami look at him. Did he say something? He wants to go into the pet store. It's like his own toy store, you know. Hitoshi explained as they stopped walking, and Takoyami's eyes got a spark behind them all of a sudden. We have time. Now that I think about it, I need to step inside myself. You have a pet. I told my mother I'd check prices on dog treats, Takoyami said, and Hitoshi just tilted his head. I don't remember seeing a dog when I visited. We got a puppy. Oh, okay. Now, Moss, you know I don't have a lot of money, so if you're going to pick something out, keep it cheap, Hitoshi instructed as he led Izuku down. Izuku started to trot into the store and went down the treat aisle. There were loads of cat treats, and Izuku went for the Milky Temptation treats, which were the cheapest and the tastiest. He kicked the treat off of the shelf and grabbed the bag in his mouth. Now, he just had to find Hitoshi and Takoyami. The store wasn't that big, and it didn't take long for Izuku to spot Hitoshi looking at the kittens in the window and was holding a fluffy black kitten in his arms while cooing. I'm right here, you know. Don't get jealous. It's not like I'm taking them home. Izuku snorted at this before looking around. He saw Takoyami. Izuku tilted his head when he spotted Takoyami in the fish section. Izuku narrowed his eyes and then trotted forward to see what Takoyami was looking at. Fish gravel. Takoyami had 2 bags in his hands and seemed to be weighing out his options. One was a bag of deep blue and black. The other bags were a transparent blue that were clear through. It was also shiny and reminded Izuku of pills. Takoyami caught Izuku out of the corner of his eye and did a double take before becoming embarrassed and trying to hide the bags behind his back. Don't worry about it. Takoyami coughed as he nervously laughed. Don't tell Hitoshi, either. It's a bird thing. Izuku only blinked and then turned and trotted back to Hitoshi, who was now holding a gray kitten and was cooing. I got my treat, Izuku told his owner. Oh, right. Hitoshi snapped out of his daze as he looked from the gray kitten and down to Izuku. He then looked at the kitten and frowned as it was clear he became attached. Goodbye, kitty. He nuzzled his nose against the kitten's nose and put the kitten down. He then extended his arm and allowed Izuku to jump on his shoulder. What did you get? Hitoshi took the treats out of Izuku's mouth and looked at them. 8. Hitoshi took the treats and paid for them. Takoyami already picked out what he needed and had it doubled bagged so it couldn't be seen. I bet that's fish gravel, Izuku thought as he looked at the bag that was clearly being weighed down. Did you get the dog treats? Hitoshi asked, and Takoyami only nervously laughed. Yeah, I guess I did. Did you get your cat treats? Yep, temptations. Now, no, Izuku, not now. Izuku felt a pout play on his lips as he bristled, and he just couldn't help it. Skank. Seriously? Hitoshi laughed out loud as he turned to look at Izuku. God, perhaps I've been spoiling you too much. Izuku's ears went low and he sighed. Takoyami and Dark Shadow both looked back and forth between the two. Is everything okay? Takoyami inquired after a few seconds. Someone is being spoiled. That's all. Hitoshi rolled eyes fondly and scratched the top of Izuku's head. Come on, I'm sure the others should be ready. So, back down the escalator they went. Izuku did get over his little pout and laid across Hitoshi's neck and he breathed in deeply. There were so many scents in the mall and it made him sneeze suddenly. Bless you. Dark Shadow poked herself out and gently patted Izuku's head. She felt cold as she touched Izuku's head. Izuku smiled and purred at her. Well, Dark Shadow seemed to have a sense of humor as she silently reached into Hitoshi's bag and took out the treats. She was silent as she opened them and took a treat out for Izuku. Izuku perked. What hey, Dark Shadow? Takoyami scolded as he retracted Dark Shadow back, but the damage was done and Izuku got his treat in the end. God, you're spoiled. Hitoshi reiterated as he rolled his eyes and put the treats back in the bag. This time he tied the bag so neither Dark Shadow nor Izuku could try something like that again. They got to the food court and saw Ida handing out Starbucks orders nearby. Hey, Hitoshi called while waving as he and Takoyami approached them all. Toga smiled as she grabbed 2 drinks, clearly Hitoshi's and Takoyami drinks. She started skipping towards them with the biggest grin. Then her grin slowly melted off of her face and turned to anger. This made Hitoshi stop for a moment. Then, next thing he knew, Toga was charging. Toga, he inquired, but was cut off when Toga let out a scream and with no warning she charged past Hitoshi, raised one of the coffee drinks above her head and tossed it, nailing someone directly in the head and splattering them with the cold and sugary drink. Toga, Achako cried, completely horrified. They all were horrified by this sudden outburst. Toga was breathing heavily as she tensed and glared at the person whom she just threw coffee on. Turns out she still wasn't done as she threw Hitoshi's drink as well on the stranger. It's you. She snarled, and the person, who had a hood up, lowered it. Oh shit. Hitoshi took an immediate step back as Naiz was now standing right there. Izuku was on his toes and hissing. He crouched low and let out a low growl while his pupils slid into tight pupils. Izuku felt his body bristle as he was kicking himself for not picking up that Naiz had been this close. Too many scents, he realized while looking around at all the people and all the food places. Too many scents muddled his. Naiz, despite being drenched in a drink, smiled, showing off his fangs that mirrored Toga's own fangs. Give it back, Toga suddenly demanded while gnashing her teeth. It doesn't belong to you. She lowered her head while looking at the ground and clenched her fists so tightly that her fists were shaking. Naiz just kept that smile on his face. The others quickly joined them, and it wasn't lost on Hitoshi that they were actually circling around him, protecting him from Naiz's wrath. Leave, Ida demanded firmly, his shoulders squared. Naiz looked from Ida to Toga, and then finally his eyes landed on Hitoshi and his smile faltered. The smile twitched down into a terrifying scowl, and he narrowed his eyes. Then, the anger melted as he relaxed, shut his eyes. He started to hum. The song was familiar. HMM Hitoshi hummed along. Happy birthday to you. Naiz was humming happy birthday, and who had a birthday coming up? Hitoshi, that's who. Izuku gave another growl as his fur rose impossibly high. Naiz then reached into his jacket and pulled out something that was gift wrapped. I think last time we had an interaction I must have spooked you. Naiz offered the present to Hitoshi. It was a box with colorful wrapping paper. The box was surprisingly big, and it made Hitoshi wonder if Kirigiri was nearby to open a portal so Naiz could do this. I said give it back, Toga roared as she then rushed at Naiz. Toga, you're quirkless, Achako yelled, and that made Toga stop and just look over her shoulder in surprise. You're no match for him. This isn't about you, Naiz grumbled as he walked past Toga, and the two of them locked eyes. Toga gnashed her teeth but said nothing. When Naiz got too close for comfort, everyone immediately formed a tighter circle around Hitoshi and raised their fists. Takoyami actually stood in front of Hitoshi, completely blocking Naiz from getting to him or Moss. Naiz just smiled again, those sharp teeth looking oddly shiny in the mall light. You're new, Naiz whispered as he tilted his head like a confused puppy at Takoyami. Takoyami and Dark Shadow both visibly bristled, with Dark Shadow wrapping herself tightly around Hitoshi and Izuku respectfully. The quirk was actually bristled the same as Izuku as she opened her maw and gave a warning screech to Naiz to get him to back away. Oh, of course. Naiz then leaned down and placed the present on the ground and gave it a kick towards Hitoshi. It slid through Takoyami's legs and stopped just at Hitoshi's feet. If Naiz was going to say something else, he never got the choice because Toga had enough. She charged again, and this time she didn't let anyone stop her. She punched Naiz across the face. Give me back my quirk, she demanded so loudly that her voice echoed through the mall and made several people stop and stare. if they weren't already that was. It was Tsu who managed to grab her and haul Toga away from Nais. Nais looked at Toga with a growl. Forget it. Nais snarled and stood up straighter. If he was injured by Toga, the injury would heal quickly. It's mine now. Toga let out a primal scream and struggled out Tsu in Achako's grasp. You bastard. You can't just, it's my quirk. Give it back. She desperately screamed while scrambling to get to him but just couldn't. Under normal circumstances, Hitoshi Nais looked back at him and then looked at Izuku. Hitoshi grabbed Izuku and protected his cat by holding him close to his chest. I wouldn't hesitate to take the cat for my own. Dark Shadow let out an angry growl, daring Nais. However, I know I'm currently outnumbered. Not only that, but I'm outmatched. All of your quirks are strong, especially yours. Nais looked at Takoyami. Takoyami narrowed his red eyes at Nais but did not engage. I wouldn't make it 5 steps. I just wanted to give you your birthday present before your birthday. Nais explained and then put his hands up. Kurajiri. A portal opened behind Nais and the Namu stepped through it before vanishing. Oh, Mina sighed and put her hands on her knees. That was scary. Dark Shadow finally released her grip on Hitoshi and Izuku. She returned to Takoyami's side and Hitoshi, once freed, bent down and picked up the present. Be wary, Takoyami advised the moment the present was in his hands. Don't open it, Hitoshi. Ida came up and chopped his hand at Hitoshi. We don't know what it could be. It could be an explosive for all we know. We need to call the teachers and... Hitoshi opened it. Several people jumped back, fearful of what could be inside. Hitoshi looked inside. It was not a bomb, but what it did was make Hitoshi turn pale regardless. What is it? Zero leaned in to look inside the box. He looked confused as he reached in and pulled the object out. I've never seen anything like this. Hitoshi swallowed hard as he looked at Izuku, who was looking at the object with the same unease as Hitoshi. Hitoshi then looked at his shoes, unable to meet their eyes. He rubbed at the edges of his mouth where the scars had since faded. It's the muzzle my uncle made me wear. The one Moss saved me from. Hitoshi whispered as he grabbed the frayed ends of the muzzle where Izuku had chewed him free. Izuku's fur refused to lay back down. He's still unhappy with you. Yeah, I'd say so. This is a threat. Toga grabbed the muzzle and inspected it. Wow, not even my own parents put me in a muzzle. She whispered to him as she looked at it from every angle. This is just disgusting. Let's burn it, she declared. Agreed, that thing is. Achako must have looked at the inside where Hitoshi knew blood stains were probably still there. She suddenly looked sickly and had to look away. Disgusting. Hitoshi didn't know if he felt better or worse about his friends' pitying glances and disgusted looks as they put the muzzle back into the present box and put the lid back on it. Takoyami took the box and refused to let Hitoshi hold it. I'll make sure a teacher gets this thing and decides what to do. Then if it's deemed all right, we'll burn it. Takoyami told Hitoshi firmly. We need to do something about that thing. Takoyami mumbled the last part as they all walked, once again forming a circle around Hitoshi as they did so. And we will. One day, I hope. Hitoshi whispered as he grabbed Takoyami's hand almost absent-mindedly as they walked. I really hope so. He's not going to stop, even when I make him hate me. If anything. Hitoshi reached with his other hand to pat Izuku up top of the head. It's spurring him on even more. Maybe, if we give me to him. No, Hitoshi nearly knocked Izuku off of him when he turned his head suddenly so he could look at Izuku. Don't you ever suggest that again, Izuku. I mean it. Sorry. Izuku lowered his gaze to the floor and just rested against Hitoshi. I don't want you to be hunted down because of me. You know he's toying with you by giving you your old muzzle back. I know. I'll just have to take it on the chin for now. Izuku draped himself around Hitoshi's neck once before lowering his ears. This left him feeling uneasy, but unable to do anything about it for now. Still, at least he can be the support cat Hitoshi needs him to be right now. The muzzle was inspected, when nothing was found, and Hitoshi scolded for opening the present without an adult there. It was then promptly burned outside of the dorms. Everyone in Wana crowded around outside as Shoto burnt the muzzle in a metal barrel that Momo had created. It went from a muzzle burning to Dabai finding Endeavor merch and burning it with the muzzle. Before they knew it, everyone was burning bad memories in front of the dorms. It was interesting that everyone had some sort of bad memory that they hung to and was more than happy to be rid of. Though, everyone burned their Endeavor merch if they had one. Fuck that guy. Then that somehow turned into everyone making s'mores outside. Never a dull day or night at this point, with 1A. Monoma was leaning against Hitoshi as he munched on a s'more while looking at a photo. Thinking of burning it? Hitoshi asked without thinking. Yeah, it's a photo of my grandfather on my mother's side. He wasn't a good guy from what I was told. He's the reason my mother turned out the way she is. Something about him. Monoma paused to take another bite, smearing marshmallow and chocolate on his face as he did this. Trying to kill my mother when she was my age. I guess he was a villain. Oh man ... Why do you have a picture of him? Hitoshi asked as took a bite of his own s'more. It wasn't mine. I found it. I never even met the guy. I only know this much because my father told me about what he knew. My mom only escaped because she had her wits about her. That's what I was told. I don't know the full story. Generational trauma. Can I see him before you burn it? Monoma finished his more and turned the picture for Hitoshi and Moss to see. The man was broad-shouldered, his hair tousled, white in color, and his eyes a blood red. There was something about this man that made Hitoshi's head turn and tilt. Moss jumped in the air in surprise. This made Hitoshi and Monoma jump as well. Moss, Hitoshi, that's my father, Izuku told Hitoshi. Izuku was low to the ground and his ears far back and flattened. What? Hitoshi whispered. That can't be right. What? Monoma asked, and Hitoshi wanted to slap himself for speaking out loud. Is something wrong? It's right. Hitoshi, that's my father. That's all for one. Oh my god. Does that make Nito my? Is he my nephew? Sorry. Hitoshi cleared his throat. Moss thought that your grandfather looked familiar is all. He wanted to know if we've met him, but obviously, we haven't. He played it off as he got a closer look at the photo. Is that your grandmother he's with? Oh yes, Grandma Monoma. She was a firecracker. Monoma grinned at the memories. At least, his smile faded. That's what I was told. Her death. Well, we can't prove it, but we're sure he killed her after he tried to kill my mother. I hate him. I never met the douche and I hate him. Hitoshi looked at Izuku again quickly. Hitoshi snatched Izuku up and held him against his chest. He was against him in such a way that nobody could see Izuku's face. Why? Because Izuku was openly crying now. I'm sorry that happened. I can't imagine the strain this man put on your entire family for years. I hope he gets what's coming to him in the end. Hitoshi tightened his grip on Moss as his cat continued to cry. Yeah, I do too. I hope he burns. Monoma hissed and then he stood, walked towards the fire barrel and dropped the picture inside. Monoma watched the picture for several long seconds, watching as the picture would warp before catching fire and would disintegrate into ash. What are we? Homeless bums? Came Abaro's voice as he jogged up to their session. He laughed at the sight of 20+ students either eating s'mores or lining up to burn a bad memory of theirs. Okay, kids, you can't do this. It's controlled. Shoto argued before dropping an Endeavor action figure into the burning barrel, which made Aburo only cross his arms. I don't care. Put it out and get rid of the barrel. Feral, the lot of you. He threw his hands up with a laugh. A burning barrel in front of the dorms. Not something I would have suspected. Nedzu is probably laughing his little rodent butt off at this. So, the barrel was put out promptly and iced down. We're totally doing this during the camp. Shoto asked Momo. Hell yeah. Momo smiled. I got more stuff to burn. Me too. Once it was all cleaned and the barrel disposed of with Shoji and Kirishima hauling off towards the dumpster, Hitoshi excused himself back to his room. His clothes smelling like smoke and his eyes slightly a little more itchy. I can't believe it. Izuku hiccuped as Hitoshi put him on his bed. He was always a bad guy. But why start a family just to kill them off? Why did he spare me and my mom? Well, I know why, but I wish I could answer that, buddy. Hitoshi thought while he stripped out of his smoke-smelling clothes and into some clean PJs for the night. I don't understand it that much either. Nito is related to me. He is. Hitoshi picked Moss up and wriggled under the covers, keeping Moss under his arm as he did this. Well, he's related to Izuku. He's not related to you. Not anymore. Right. Let's get some sleep. Yeah. We're going to need all we can get before heading off to camp tomorrow. Yeah, you're right. Night. But it was not a restful night. For either of them. All right, one at a time. Don't push, don't shove. Momo kept the line moving for the bus as she motioned for people onto the bus. Moss was supervising on her shoulder. It was his duty as vice class rep after all. Shoto was standing beside her waiting and watching. When the last person boarded the bus, so did he, and then finally Momo and Moss. Go on. Momo grabbed Izuku and put him on the bus floor. Izuku padded immediately to Hitoshi and jumped on his lap. Hitoshi grinned at him. Time for a new adventure, Mossy. Hitoshi, despite not getting much sleep the night before, was still excited and ready. I have to agree. Ida, who was sitting in the window seat next to Hitoshi, fixed his glasses and smiled. A new adventure is just what this class needs. To take our minds off of things. You get it. Hitoshi smiled at Ida. The bus would move before too long and Hitoshi was smiling. This is what they needed. Like Ida said. Besides, there's no way for Nais to find them at the camp. His father, all three of them, reassured Hitoshi that this camp was in a secret location that only the teachers knew about. So, Hitoshi could relax and look forward to the next 2 weeks with his classmates and friends. Bonus. Dabai patted Toga's hair as the girl pouted. I miss them already. She whined while she laid on the couch of their own little dorm. They just left no more than an hour ago, Toga. Dabai told her with a laugh before he stood and walked over to the dining area. Their own living space was away from the main dorms. Toga did have her own dorm being a Gen Ed student, but she preferred to stay with Dabai and Twice. This dorm was more like a glorified apartment with 5 separate rooms and a common room for everyone to share. Dabai went to make himself a coffee. How is it, by the way? The Gen Ed kids are giving you a hard time. Nah, they leave me be. They think I'm weird. She huffed and pressed her face against the couch cushion. All of my friends are in the hero course and now I'm alone. She pounded her fists and legs into the couch like a toddler having a tantrum. Ouch, and here I thought Twice and I were your friends. Dabai could only grin as he watched this. You are, but they're my age and they're really, really nice. Toga sniffled. Hey, we're nice, fuck you. Twice flipped Toga off before quickly shaking his head to regain himself. Sorry, no, I'm not. The door to their dorms opened and everyone immediately turned towards the noise. Nedzu popped his head in and smiled at them. Congrats. He cheered while throwing confetti in the air. What for? Dabai inquired. You three got a new roommate. A new roommate. Boo, I don't want to share my shit. Twice made a thumbs down as he said this. Dabai narrowed his eyes and looked at Toga, who also had her eyes narrowed. Why do I have a feeling we're not going to like this new roommate or ours? You're sharp. Nedzu chuckled. You're not. I'm going to be blunt. But he's agreed to help us take down Nyes and get you your quirk back, Ms. Toga. Nedzu looked at Toga as he finished and then stepped to the side. You know him, you all do. Tamura. Tamura Shigaraki stepped into the common room. He didn't have the hand on his face or anything of the sort. Instead, he just put his hands in his pockets, sighed, and gave them all a 2-finger salute. Sup? Dabai and Twice had to both tackle Toga the moment she jumped from the couch. This was to prevent her from going into the kitchen and grabbing the biggest knife possible to stab Tamura's scrawny ass. This was going to be an interesting new roommate for sure. Another one. This one I just thought of and had to add it. PSD... You got the goods. Achako peeked over her seat at Hitoshi and stared eagerly at him. Now, he could only ask her as he looked around at the bus full of people that could see this go down. They were right next to Ida for crying out loud. I just need my fix, man. Achako whispered as she ducked low against the back of her seat. Please. Hitoshi rolled his eyes. Fine. And he raised Moss up to her face and flashed his little paw to her. Achako let out a happy squeak. They're so cute. She squealed as she looked at Izuku's toe beans. I just can't believe they're pink. I would have thought they were green or black. She clapped her hands and then she reached over and with her index finger she tapped the center of Moss's paw pad. Moss closed his claws around her finger, but not enough to sink in or hurt her. He's so cute. Look at those murder mittens. These murder mittens have saved my life, believe it or not. Hitoshi grinned before bringing Izuku down and laying him in his lap. Did you get your fix, you crack addict? Thanks. And just like that she was gone. Hitoshi rolled his eyes and then looked at Ida. Ida looked aghast, shocked, and horrified all in one. Hitoshi only shrugged. Wanna hit? The first time is always the scariest. Knock it off. Ida roared, making Hitoshi's hair blow back as Hitoshi could only laugh. Fair.